Hi everyone, welcome to another calm night. Before we dive into the stories, share an interesting or bedtime story that made you feel relaxed or comforted. Your comment might help someone else tonight. Now get cozy, relax, and enjoy the stories. My brother's friend keeps making excuses to come into my room, and it's weirding me out. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I honestly don't know if I'm overreacting or if my gut is screaming at me for a reason. I'm a 24-year-old woman living at home again after moving back last year to save money. My older brother Daniel is 27 and still lives here too. We grew up close enough, not best friends, but not enemies either. The house is a typical suburban place in the Midwest. 4 bedrooms, finished basement, nothing fancy. It's always been a safe place for me, which is why this whole situation is messing with my head so badly. Daniel has this friend named Kyle. They've known each other since high school, and he's been around our house on and off for years. Kyle is 28, works construction, and used to only show up occasionally to watch a game or help my brother work on his car. I barely interacted with him back then. He was just another one of my brother's friends, loud, kind of obnoxious, but harmless in that background noise way. Things started feeling off a few months ago, but it was so subtle at first that I brushed it off. Kyle began coming over more often. At first it made sense because Daniel had just gone through a breakup, and Kyle was trying to keep him busy. They'd hang out in the living room, order food, play video games, whatever. I mostly stayed in my room after work, scrolling on my phone or watching shows. I didn't think much of it. The first time Kyle came into my room, I thought it was an honest mistake. My door was slightly open because I was airing it out after cleaning. I was sitting on my bed, folding laundry, when he knocked lightly and leaned in. He said, "Hey, sorry, I thought this was the bathroom." That didn't make a lot of sense, because the bathroom is down the hall and clearly looks like a bathroom, but I laughed it off. I told him it was okay and pointed him in the right direction. He lingered for a second, glanced around my room, commented on a poster I had on the wall, then left. I remember feeling mildly uncomfortable, but not alarmed. People do awkward things sometimes. I told myself I was being dramatic. After that, it kept happening. Not exactly the same excuse every time, but always some reason for him to be at my door. One night he knocked and said Daniel asked him to grab a phone charger and thought I might have an extra. I did have one, so I handed it to him at the door. He asked if it was okay to come in for a second while he untangled it. I said sure, again not wanting to seem rude. He stepped inside, looked around again, and made small talk about my job, how late I work, how tired I must be all the time. I remember thinking it was weird that he knew my schedule so well, but Daniel talks a lot, so I assumed that's how he knew. Another time, he knocked and said he thought he left his hat in my room the last time he was over. I told him I hadn't seen it, but he asked if he could check, just in case. That's when something in my chest tightened. I didn't remember him ever being in my room before the charger incident. I said I didn't think it was in there, but he was already halfway inside. He looked under my desk, near my closet, places a hat wouldn't logically be. He laughed it off when he didn't find anything and said he must have left it in Daniel's car. I started keeping my door closed after that. Even with my door closed, Kyle still found reasons to knock. He asked if I had Tylenol. He asked if our Wi-Fi password had changed. He asked if I could show him where we keep the extra blankets. The blankets are in a hallway closet that everyone knows about. Each time, I'd answer from behind the door or crack it open just enough to respond. Each time, he tried to push the conversation further. What really started freaking me out was how often he did this when Daniel wasn't around. Daniel works rotating shifts and sometimes leaves early or comes home late. I noticed Kyle would show up even when my brother wasn't there yet. He'd say he was just waiting for Daniel to get back or that they were supposed to meet up later. Somehow, during that waiting time, he'd end up near my room. One afternoon, I was getting out of the shower and walking back to my room in a towel. I heard footsteps in the hallway and almost ran. Kyle was standing there, holding a drink, and jumped a little when he saw me. He apologized quickly and said he thought Daniel was home and that he didn't know anyone was showering. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I locked my door as soon as I got inside and sat on my bed shaking. That night, I barely slept. I started questioning myself constantly. Was I imagining things? Was I projecting fear onto normal behavior? I didn't want to accuse someone of being creepy without proof. Kyle had never touched me. He had never said anything explicitly sexual. It was all just wrong vibes and excuses that didn't quite add up. I finally mentioned it casually to my mom, Susan, one morning while we were making coffee. I said Kyle had been coming into my room a lot and it made me uncomfortable. She frowned, but brushed it off, saying he's probably just clueless and doesn't realize it comes across that way. She told me to lock my door if it bothered me. That answer didn't make me feel better. I tried talking to Daniel next. I didn't want to sound accusatory, so I framed it as a boundary issue. I told him Kyle kept coming into my room or knocking on my door, and it was making me uneasy. Daniel looked confused and said Kyle never mentioned anything like that. He laughed a little and said Kyle is just awkward and doesn't have great social awareness. He told me not to read into it. After that conversation, I noticed Kyle's behavior changed slightly, but not in a good way. He stopped knocking as much, but when he did, he'd make comments like, "Don't worry, I won't come in," or "I know you don't like visitors." It felt passive-aggressive, like he knew I'd complained and wanted me to know he knew. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my door. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. I heard someone pause, then walk away. The next morning, Daniel mentioned Kyle had crashed on the couch because he drank too much. I felt sick. I started double-checking my lock every night. I moved a small dresser in front of my door, just enough that it would make noise if someone tried to open it. I hated that I felt the need to do that in my own home. The final straw happened last weekend. Daniel was out running errands and Kyle showed up early again. I stayed in my room with the door locked, pretending not to hear anything. After about 20 minutes, there was a knock. He said Daniel texted him and asked him to grab a hoodie from my room because it was one Daniel had borrowed from me. That was a lie. Daniel has never borrowed my clothes. I didn't answer. He knocked again, louder this time. I told him through the door that Daniel could get it himself later. There was a long pause. Then he said okay and walked away. I felt this overwhelming mix of fear and anger. I realized I shouldn't have to justify why someone isn't allowed in my room. I shouldn't feel trapped or watched. I texted Daniel right then and told him Kyle was not allowed in my room anymore, and that if he kept coming over, I needed him to be there the entire time. Daniel replied hours later, saying I was being intense and that I was making things awkward for no reason. Now I'm sitting here wondering what I'm supposed to do next. I don't feel safe, but I also feel like no one is taking me seriously because nothing overt has happened. I don't want to blow up my relationship with my brother or cause drama in my family, but I also don't want to keep living like this. I don't know if I'm being paranoid or if this is one of those situations where people only understand after something bad happens. I needed to get this off my chest because it's eating at me. I feel like I'm constantly on edge in a place that's supposed to be home, and I don't know how to make it stop. Update. My brother's friend keeps making excuses to come into my room, and it's weirding me out. I didn't plan on updating so soon, but things escalated faster than I expected, and I feel like I'm living in a completely different house than I was a week ago. After I posted, I try to take a step back and really listen to my instincts instead of downplaying them like I've been doing for months. I also realized that waiting for something undeniable to happen was not a plan. It was a gamble. The day after everything with the hoodie excuse, I sat down with my brother again. This time I didn't soften my words. I told Daniel very clearly that Kyle lying to get into my room crossed a line and that I did not feel safe. I told him about the late night footsteps, about catching Kyle in the hallway when I was in a towel, about how he always seemed to show up when Daniel wasn't home. I said the word unsafe out loud, which felt dramatic but also honest. Daniel got defensive almost immediately. He said I was accusing his best friend of being a creep and that I was taking things too far. He asked why I didn't just tell Kyle to stop myself if it bothered me so much. That question broke something in me. I told him I shouldn't have to confront a grown man about not coming into my bedroom uninvited. I told him it wasn't my job to manage his friend's behavior. I also asked him why he was more worried about Kyle feeling awkward than about his own sister being scared in her own home. He didn't have an answer for that. He just shook his head and said he thought I was misreading everything. Later that night, my mom asked me to come sit with her in the kitchen. Daniel had clearly talked to her. She told me she didn't think Kyle was dangerous, but admitted that the hoodie lie didn't sit right with her. She asked me what I wanted to do. I told her I wanted Kyle banned from the house unless Daniel was present the entire time, and that I wanted a lock installed on my door that actually worked instead of the flimsy one I had. Saying it out loud made it feel real. She agreed to the lock immediately, which surprised me. The lock was installed 2 days later. Knowing I could actually secure my door helped a little, but the tension in the house was thick. Daniel barely spoke to me. Kyle didn't come over during that time, which I thought might be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 nights ago, I came home late from work and noticed a car parked in the driveway that wasn't Daniel's. My stomach dropped before I even got out of my car. I walked inside and heard voices in the living room. Daniel and Kyle were there, drinking beer and watching TV. Daniel looked at me like I had interrupted something. Kyle smiled and said hi, like nothing had ever happened. I went straight to my room and locked the door. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock. It was Daniel, not Kyle. He asked if we could talk. I opened the door just enough to hear him. He said Kyle wanted to apologize if he made me uncomfortable and that he thought it would be better to clear the air. I told him absolutely not, and that Kyle had no reason to be near my room at all. Daniel got frustrated and said I was acting like Kyle was some kind of criminal. Then I heard Kyle's voice from down the hallway. He said, "I don't get why she's so scared of me." Hearing him talk about me like that while standing so close made my skin crawl. I closed and locked my door again. A few minutes later, I heard Kyle laughing, followed by Daniel saying they'd head out to the garage. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found something that pushed me from uncomfortable to genuinely alarmed. I was cleaning my room and noticed my window curtain had been moved. I always keep it fully closed. I thought maybe I'd forgotten, but then I noticed a faint handprint on the glass from the outside. My room is on the ground floor, facing the side yard. Anyone could technically walk by, but the idea that someone might have been standing there looking in made me feel sick. I can't prove it was Kyle, but the timing was too perfect to ignore. I took pictures and showed my mom. She went quiet in a way I'd never seen before. She told me she didn't want Kyle in the house anymore. Period. She said she should have taken me more seriously earlier and apologized for brushing it off. That apology meant more to me than I can explain. When Daniel came home that evening, my mom told him her decision. He exploded. He said we were overreacting, that this was ridiculous, that we were ruining his friendship over paranoia. My mom stood her ground. She said if Kyle was making her daughter feel unsafe, then Kyle was no longer welcome. Daniel stormed out of the house and didn't come back until the next day. Since then, Kyle hasn't been back. Daniel is barely speaking to either of us. He spends most of his time in his room or out with friends. I hate that things have come to this, but for the first time in months, I can breathe a little easier in my own space. I still lock my door at night. I still jump at noises, but I don't feel watched anymore. I don't know what this means for my relationship with my brother long term. I don't know if he'll ever fully believe me or if he'll always think I exaggerated. What I do know is that ignoring my instincts almost convinced me that my fear wasn't valid. It was. Even if nothing worse happened, the constant anxiety was already too much. Right now, I'm focusing on getting through each day and rebuilding that sense of safety. I hate that it took things escalating for people to listen, but I'm glad they finally did. Stories number 2. My best friend pretended to be my friend for years just to sleep with me. I never thought I would be the kind of person who posts something like this, but I can't get this out of my head and I don't know what to do with it anymore. I feel stupid, embarrassed, angry, and honestly kind of violated in a way I didn't expect. I keep replaying the last few years of my life and realizing that so many moments I thought were real might have been fake. I'm a woman in my mid-20s, living in the US, and until recently, I thought I had one of those rare, solid, ride-or-die friendships that people talk about. I met my best friend in college. We were both new, awkward, broke, and trying to figure out who we were. He was funny in a quiet way, always there when things went wrong, and he became my safe person really fast. I trusted him with things I didn't even tell my family. Breakups, family problems, anxiety, all of it. He knew everything. From the beginning, our friendship felt different from others. We talked every day. We studied together, grabbed food together, watched movies at each other's places, and supported each other through some really rough times. People constantly asked if we were dating, and we always laughed it off. I was very clear, more than once, that I didn't see him romantically. He always said he understood and that he valued our friendship above everything else. I believed him. Over the years, he became woven into my life. He knew my routines, my habits, my fears. He knew when I was sad just from my voice. When I got into relationships, he was the person I went to for advice. When those relationships ended, he was the one who helped me put myself back together. He told me he was happy just being my friend and that not everyone needs romance to have something meaningful. That stuck with me. Looking back now, there were little moments that I brushed off. Subtle comments about how any guy I dated didn't deserve me. Jokes about how he would treat me better than anyone else. Long hugs that lasted a bit too long. If I ever pulled away, he would apologize and say he didn't mean anything by it. I told myself I was overthinking it. I didn't want to lose him, so I ignored my gut. Fast forward to recently. I went through a really hard breakup. I was emotionally wrecked, questioning myself, feeling unwanted and exhausted. He was there constantly, checking on me, bringing food, sitting with me late into the night while I cried. He kept telling me I deserved better, that I was strong, that I wasn't alone. At my lowest point, I leaned on him more than I ever had before. One night, after a lot of talking and drinking, things crossed a line. I won't go into details, but we slept together. It wasn't romantic in the way movies show. It felt confusing, emotional, and heavy. I remember feeling numb afterward, not relieved or happy like I thought I might feel. The next morning, I was quiet and overwhelmed. He, on the other hand, seemed almost triumphant, like something had finally gone right. Over the next few days, I tried to process what had happened. I asked him what this meant. His response shattered me. He told me he had been in love with me for years. He admitted that he always believed if he waited long enough, if he was patient enough, I would eventually come around. He said sleeping with me felt like proof that he had been right all along. When I told him that hurt me, that it made me feel like our entire friendship was built on an ulterior motive, he didn't deny it. He said he never lied about caring about me, but that yes, a part of him was always hoping it would turn into something more. He said he felt entitled to a chance because of everything he had done for me over the years. That's when something inside me broke. All those late night talks, all the comfort, all the support, suddenly felt tainted. I started wondering if every time he listened to me cry, he was just waiting for his turn. If every hug had been calculated, if my pain had been an opportunity for him. I felt sick thinking about it. I told him I needed space. He didn't take that well. He accused me of using him, of leading him on, of throwing him away now that he got what he wanted. That sentence stuck with me. Got what he wanted. It made me realize how differently we saw the same event. To me, it was a mistake made during vulnerability. To him, it was a goal achieved. I've been replaying our entire friendship in my head since then. Wondering if he would have stayed my friend if there was zero chance of sleeping with me. Wondering if he respected my boundaries at all or just tolerated them until they broke. I feel grief, not just for the friendship I lost, but for the version of my life where I thought I had someone who genuinely saw me as a person, not a prize. Now I don't know how to move forward. I feel angry at him, but also angry at myself for trusting so deeply. I feel like my consent was complicated by years of emotional dependence that I didn't fully understand at the time. I feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. I feel used, even though a part of me keeps questioning whether I'm allowed to feel that way. I haven't talked to him in weeks. Mutual friends are confused and asking questions. I don't know what to tell them. I don't know if cutting him off completely is the right thing or if I'm overreacting. I just know that I can't look at him the same way anymore. And the idea that someone could pretend to be my friend for years, just waiting for the right moment, makes it hard to trust anyone now. I keep asking myself if real friendship can survive something like this, or if it was never real to begin with. I don't know what the right answer is, but I needed to get this off my chest because carrying it alone is exhausting. Update. My best friend pretended to be my friend for years just to sleep with me. I didn't think I would be back this soon, but a lot has happened and I feel like I'm losing my grip on what's normal. After I posted, I tried to sit with everything and stay quiet, but the situation didn't stay contained the way I hoped it would. It's like once I stepped back, everything else rushed in to fill the space. A few days after I stopped responding to him, he started reaching out again. At first it was casual messages, asking how I was doing, then long paragraphs about how much he missed me and how hard this was for him. I didn't reply. That silence seemed to make things worse. He sent another message saying he felt like I was punishing him for being honest about his feelings. That line made my stomach drop because it reframed everything as if I had wronged him by needing distance. I finally responded once, very clearly, saying I needed space and that I was hurt and confused. I didn't accuse him. I didn't insult him. I just explained that I was struggling to reconcile our friendship with what he had admitted. His reply was defensive almost immediately. He said I was rewriting history and making him into a villain. He said he never forced me to do anything and that I was an adult who made a choice. That part especially stuck with me because it felt like he was erasing all the context that led up to that night. Then mutual friends started reaching out. Apparently, he had been talking to them. Not telling the full story, but enough to paint himself as heartbroken and blindsided. One friend asked me why I would sleep with him if I didn't have feelings. Another said maybe I should give him a chance since we already crossed that line. Hearing that made me feel small and exposed, like something deeply personal had become a group discussion I never agreed to be part of. I realized then that he wasn't just struggling privately, he was controlling the narrative. I decided to talk to one close friend and tell her everything. Saying it out loud made it even clearer how messed up it all was. She pointed out something I hadn't been able to articulate, that he waited until I was emotionally wrecked to make his move. That regardless of consent, the power dynamic mattered. Hearing someone else say that made me cry harder than I have in a long time. A few nights later, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. That was the moment I stopped feeling conflicted and started feeling scared. He said he just wanted to talk and clear the air. I told him through the door that this wasn't okay and that he needed to leave. He stood there for a while, talking through the door about how unfair this all was and how he deserved closure. I didn't open it. Eventually he left, but I spent the rest of the night shaking. After that, I blocked him everywhere. Social media, phone, everything. It felt extreme, but also like the only way to breathe again. Almost immediately, I felt a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief because the noise stopped. Grief because cutting him off made it final. It forced me to accept that the person I thought was my best friend doesn't exist in the way I believed he did. More things started clicking into place after that. Memories I had brushed off suddenly felt different. Times he discouraged me from dating certain people. Times he subtly positioned himself as the only one who truly understood me. Times he acted hurt when I pulled away emotionally. I don't know if it was intentional manipulation or just entitlement mixed with insecurity, but the effect was the same. I've also been dealing with a lot of self-doubt. I keep asking myself why I didn't leave earlier, why I trusted so completely, why I ignored my instincts. But I'm starting to understand that trust isn't a flaw. He didn't take advantage of me because I was naive. He took advantage because I was vulnerable, and he chose himself over my well-being. Right now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my sense of safety, leaning on people who respect my boundaries, learning that I'm allowed to change my mind even after years, that I'm allowed to walk away from something that hurts even if it once meant everything to me. It still hurts more than I expected, but the fog is lifting. I don't know if he truly understands why this ended the way it did, and honestly, I'm starting to realize that he doesn't have to. What matters is that I finally chose myself instead of preserving a friendship that only existed on his terms. I'm still angry. I'm still sad. But for the first time since all of this started, I don't feel crazy for feeling the way I do. Final update. My best friend pretended to be my friend for years just to sleep with me. It's been a while since my last update, and I needed time before writing this because I wanted to be honest instead of reactive. A lot of the intensity has settled, and what's left is clarity, even if it still hurts. I don't feel like I'm in crisis mode anymore. I feel grounded, and that's something I didn't think I'd get back so soon. After I blocked him everywhere, things went quiet for a bit. That silence was uncomfortable at first, almost addictive in a strange way, because my brain was so used to his presence. I kept reaching for my phone out of habit, but slowly, the quiet started to feel peaceful instead of empty. I slept better. I laughed more easily. I didn't feel like I was bracing myself all the time. Then the consequences of his actions started showing themselves. A few mutual friends reached out again, but this time the tone was different. Apparently, his version of events kept changing. Stories weren't lining up. Some people noticed he kept centering himself as the victim while never acknowledging why I might need distance. I didn't push or correct anyone. I just told the truth when asked and let the rest go. It was strangely empowering to stop managing other people's perceptions. One thing I didn't expect was how angry I would feel weeks later. Not explosive anger, but a deep, steady kind. I realized how much emotional labor I had given him over the years. How often I put his feelings first because I thought that's what good friends do. How often I minimized my own discomfort to keep the peace. That anger wasn't about revenge. It was about self-respect finally catching up. I also started therapy, which I should have done earlier, but I'm glad I did it now. Talking through the friendship from start to finish helped me see patterns I couldn't see before. Not just in him, but in me. My tendency to over-empathize. My fear of hurting people even when I'm hurting. My belief that being kind means enduring discomfort. None of that makes me weak, but it does mean I have to be more careful with who I give access to my life. A few weeks ago, he tried to reach out again through an email I didn't have blocked. It was long, emotional, and filled with apologies that still somehow centered his pain. He said he finally understood why I felt betrayed. He said he missed me and hoped we could talk someday. I read it once, closed it, and didn't respond. That was the moment I knew I was done. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't need closure from him anymore. I had already given it to myself. What surprised me most is that I don't miss him the way I thought I would. I miss the idea of the friendship. I miss the comfort I believed was real. But I don't miss the version of myself who was constantly negotiating her boundaries to keep someone else comfortable. That version of me deserved better, and so does the person I'm becoming. I've learned that intentions don't erase impact, that someone can care about you and still harm you. That friendship built on unspoken expectations isn't friendship. it's a transaction. And I've learned that walking away doesn't mean the years meant nothing. It just means they don't get to define the rest of my life. So this is where it ends. I'm moving forward with more confidence, better boundaries, and a much clearer understanding of what real friendship feels like. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm just done. And honestly, that feels like the healthiest ending I could have hoped for. Stories number 3. My mother-in-law crossed a line with my baby, and I walked out. I never thought I would be the kind of person who packed a bag, strapped my baby into a car seat, and left my own house in the middle of the afternoon. I always judged those stories on Reddit where people said they just left. I used to think there had to be more to it. Now I am living it, and my hands are still shaking while I type this. I am a 27-year-old mom living in Ohio. My son is 4 months old. He is my first baby, and I love him more than I can explain. His dad, my husband Daniel, is 29. We have been together for 6 years and married for 2. For the most part, Daniel is a good husband and a loving father. The problem has always been his mom, Linda. From the moment I got pregnant, Linda acted like my baby was her second chance at motherhood. She told me what to eat, how to sleep, and even tried to tell me what name I should pick. When I said I wanted to breastfeed, she laughed and said, "We'll see how long that lasts." I brushed it off back then. I was tired, hormonal, and trying to keep the peace. After my son was born, things got worse. Linda showed up unannounced constantly. She would walk into our house and take the baby out of my arms without asking. She criticized everything I did. If he cried, it was because I was holding him wrong. If he slept, it was because she had that magic touch. Daniel always said she meant well and that I was being sensitive. The biggest issue became feeding. I am breastfeeding and pumping. It has not been easy, but it matters a lot to me. My son had some tummy issues early on, and breast milk really helped him. Our pediatrician supports it. Daniel knows this. Linda knows this too, or at least I thought she did. Last week, Linda offered to watch the baby for a few hours so I could rest. I was exhausted and honestly desperate for sleep. Daniel had gone back to work, and I was alone most days. I left clear instructions. There was pumped milk in the fridge with labels and times. I showed her everything. She smiled and said, "I raised 2 kids. I know what I'm doing." When I came back, my baby was fussy and gassy in a way I had not seen in weeks. I asked Linda if everything went okay. She casually said, "Oh, he was still hungry." So I gave him a little formula. "You don't have enough milk." I could tell. I felt like the air got sucked out of the room. I asked her what formula. She pointed to a can she had brought from her house. I told her our pediatrician said not to introduce formula yet because of his stomach. She rolled her eyes and said, "Doctors don't know everything. You clearly don't know how to raise your son if you think starving him is okay." I lost it. I told her she had no right to feed my baby something I did not approve. I told her she crossed a huge boundary. She laughed again and said, "You're overreacting. You young moms read too much online and think you're experts." That was the moment something in me snapped. I picked up my son and went to our bedroom. I started packing a bag with shaking hands. Linda followed me, still talking, saying I was dramatic and ungrateful. Daniel came home in the middle of this and looked confused. Linda immediately started crying and told him I was attacking her and acting unstable. I told Daniel exactly what happened. I told him she fed our baby formula behind my back and insulted me as a mother. I waited for him to stand up for me. Instead, he sighed and said, "Mom, you should have asked first." But she was just trying to help. That hurt more than anything Linda said. I asked Daniel if he thought it was okay that his mother ignored our rules and called me incapable. He said we could talk about it later and that I should calm down. I did not feel like I could calm down. I felt betrayed in my own home. I finished packing, buckled my baby into his seat, and left. I went to my sister Emily's house. She took one look at me and hugged me while I cried. Since then, my phone has been blowing up. Daniel says I am overreacting and embarrassing him. Linda left a voicemail saying I kidnapped my own child and that she might need to get lawyers involved if I keep her grandson from her. That scared me. I have done nothing illegal, but the threat alone made my stomach drop. I feel torn in half. Part of me wonders if I really did overreact by leaving. Another part of me feels like if I did not draw a hard line now, this would only get worse. I keep replaying her words in my head, telling me I do not know how to raise my own son. I have not slept much. I am exhausted, emotional, and angry. I love my husband, but I do not know how to move forward if he cannot see how serious this is. I am scared about what comes next, especially with her throwing around legal threats. Right now, I am just trying to protect my baby and my sanity. I never imagined something as simple as feeding my son would turn into this kind of nightmare. Stories number 4. My vegan coworker is upset about getting non-vegan gifts 3 years in a row. I work at a mid-sized marketing firm in Ohio, and I have been here a little over 5 years now. The office is the kind of place where everyone tries very hard to be friendly without actually being friends. We do birthday cards, baby shower collections, and holiday gift exchanges. It is very corporate friendly, but still casual enough that people joke around in the break room and overshare during lunch. I am 32, and I manage a small team of 6 people. One of them is a woman named Lauren, who is 28. Lauren is vegan, and she is very open about it. I do not mean that in a judgmental way. It is just a fact that comes up often. She brings her own lunches, she checks ingredients on office snacks, and she has declined catered food more times than I can count. No one has ever given her a hard time about it, as far as I know. If anything, people go out of their way to accommodate her. Every December, our department does a Secret Santa. The budget is $25. Names are pulled randomly. Participation is optional, but in reality, everyone joins, because opting out feels awkward. The gift exchange happens during our last in office, day before the holidays. 3 years ago was the first year I managed this team. I did not set the rules. I just ran with what had already been done. We pulled names out of a mug in the conference room. I ended up with the name of a guy named Trevor who is obsessed with craft beer. Lauren got assigned to a woman named Denise who loves candles. Everything seemed normal. On the day of the exchange, Lauren opened her gift, and it was a fancy box of gourmet chocolates and a Starbucks gift card. She smiled, but I noticed her expression tightened just a little. Later that day, she mentioned quietly to a few people that the chocolates were not vegan. She did not make a scene. She did not yell. She just looked disappointed. Denise apologized when she realized and said she honestly did not think about it. Denise is in her 40s and is the type of person who just grabs something nice without overthinking. Lauren accepted the apology, but she did bring it up again later in the break room. She said it felt like people never really listened when she talked about being vegan. At the time, I thought that was the end of it. The next year, we did Secret Santa again. I asked if anyone wanted to opt out. No one did. Names were pulled again. I did not keep track of who had who, because it is supposed to be anonymous. On exchange day, Lauren opened her gift, and it was a leather wallet and a bag of gourmet beef jerky. The room went quiet. Someone actually said, "Oh no," out loud. Lauren laughed, but it was the kind of laugh you do when you are uncomfortable. She said, "Well, I guess I will give this to my brother." She made a joke about how at least it was consistent. Afterward, she came to my office. She closed the door and told me she felt disrespected. She said this was the second year in a row she received something that directly went against her ethics. She asked me if it was intentional. I told her I honestly did not know and that I was sorry. I offered to reimburse her personally or get her a replacement gift from the department budget. She declined and said it was not about the money. She said it was about being seen as a person. I told her I understood and that next year we would be more careful. This year rolls around and honestly, I thought I had handled it. I sent an email reminding everyone to be considerate of dietary restrictions and personal values when buying gifts. I did not name Lauren specifically. I just said in general. We did the exchange last week. Lauren opened her gift and it was a luxury wool scarf and a sampler of artisanal cheeses. I felt my stomach drop. I could see her hands shaking. She did not cry, but her eyes went glossy. She stood up and said she needed some air and left the room. The rest of the exchange was awkward. People whispered. Someone asked me if Lauren was okay. I said I would check on her. She did not come back for the rest of the day. The next morning, I had an email from HR asking me to come in. Lauren had filed a complaint. She claimed that the repeated gifting of non-vegan items constituted harassment and a hostile work environment. She said it was targeted and intentional at this point. HR asked me to walk through the past 3 years. I told them exactly what happened. I showed them the email I sent this year reminding people to be considerate. They asked if I knew who bought the gift. I did not. They asked if I could find out. I said that would defeat the point of Secret Santa, but I would if they wanted me to. Later that day, Lauren asked to speak with me. She was calm but very firm. She said she was consulting a lawyer. She said she felt singled out because of her ethical beliefs. She said if it was a religious restriction, people would take it more seriously. I told her I was sorry and that I never intended for this to happen. I told her I would support whatever decision HR made. She asked me why I let the exchange happen again after the first 2 years. I told her because she never asked to opt out and because the exchange is meant to be inclusive. She said, inclusion without consideration is meaningless. Now I am stuck in the middle. HR has suspended the gift exchange indefinitely. There is an investigation. I have team members angry that a tradition is gone. I have Lauren feeling hurt and possibly preparing legal action. I feel like I failed as a manager. Part of me wonders if this really rises to the level of harassment or if it is just a series of careless mistakes by different people. Another part of me understands why 3 years in a row feels intentional even if it was not coordinated. I am also frustrated because no one ever comes to me directly until it becomes a formal issue. If Lauren had said she wanted to opt out or wanted to set specific rules, I would have done it immediately. At the same time, I get that it is not her job to manage everyone else's thoughtfulness. Now people are walking on eggshells. Conversations stop when Lauren enters the room. She eats lunch alone. I hate that this is the outcome. I keep replaying everything in my head. I keep asking myself what I should have done differently. Should I have canceled Secret Santa after the 2nd year? Should I have assigned gifts instead of keeping it anonymous? Should I have forced everyone to submit gift ideas? I am worried about the legal side. I am worried about team morale. I am worried about Lauren and whether she will quit. I am also worried that no matter what I do now, it will be seen as too little, too late. I feel like I am being pulled in 5 different directions, and I honestly do not know what the right move is anymore. Update. My vegan coworker is upset about getting non-vegan gifts 3 years in a row. It has been about 6 weeks since everything blew up, and a lot has happened. I waited to say anything because HR explicitly told me not to discuss the situation while they were investigating. I also needed time to process everything myself because the stress level at work has been unreal. The first big development was HR concluding their investigation. They determined that there was no evidence of coordinated or intentional harassment by any single employee. They classified the situation as repeated negligence combined with poor management oversight, which honestly stung to read even if it was accurate. I was formally written up for failing to adequately adjust a workplace activity after a known issue was raised more than once. That write-up will stay in my file for a year. Lauren was informed of their findings, and she was not satisfied. She met with HR again and brought an attorney with her. I was not present for that meeting, but HR later summarized it for me. Her lawyer argued that ethical veganism qualifies as a protected philosophical belief under state discrimination guidelines, and that repeated disregard could be interpreted as hostile behavior even without explicit intent. The company's legal team pushed back hard. They emphasized that participation was optional and that Lauren never formally requested accommodation beyond expressing frustration. They also pointed out that gifts were anonymous and purchased by different people each year, which made targeted intent difficult to prove. After 2 weeks of back and forth, Lauren withdrew her legal complaint. I found out later, through HR, that her lawyer advised her that while she had a strong emotional case, it would be an uphill battle legally and could drag on for months with no guaranteed outcome. She accepted a settlement that involved mandatory sensitivity training for our department and a small compensation payout that came from corporate, not our team budget. Lauren did not quit, but our relationship has definitely changed. She no longer chats with me casually. Our conversations are strictly professional now. She does her job well, and I have no complaints about her performance, but the warmth is gone. I do not blame her for that. The rest of the team reacted in mixed ways. A guy named Marcus was openly annoyed and said people were too sensitive these days. Another coworker, named Emily, privately thanked me for taking the situation seriously because she has food allergies and realized how easily she could be in a similar position. Others just wanted everything to go back to normal. Secret Santa is officially canceled company-wide, not just for our department. Instead, the company now does a catered lunch where employees can select meals in advance based on dietary needs. Ironically, Lauren still eats separately because she does not trust the vendors, but at least the option is there. The hardest part for me has been realizing that good intentions are not enough in a management role. I truly believed that reminding people to be considerate was sufficient. I now understand that once an issue repeats itself, it stops being an accident and starts being a responsibility failure. I also learned that anonymity can be a shield for carelessness. During HR interviews, it became clear that the people who bought the gifts were not malicious. One admitted they thought vegan just meant no meat and did not consider leather or wool. Another said they assumed Lauren would just re-gift like before. That realization made everything worse in a way because it showed how little thought was actually given. Lauren and I had one final honest conversation last week. She told me she felt invisible. She said it was exhausting to constantly advocate for herself and be labeled difficult. She said she did not want special treatment, just basic respect. I apologized without qualifying it or defending myself. That was the first time she seemed to soften even a little. I do not know if things will ever feel normal again, but I am trying to do better. I document everything now. I follow up concerns in writing. I do not assume silence means acceptance. This experience has changed how I view my role and honestly, how I view workplace culture as a whole. I never thought a $25 gift exchange could spiral into HR investigations lawyers and lasting tension, but here we are. If nothing else, I learned that small repeated oversights can add up to something much bigger and much more damaging than anyone expects. Stories number 5. My boyfriend tried to ban my friends from our place, but keeps inviting his. I never thought I would be the kind of person who brings relationship drama to the internet, but here I am, because I honestly don't know if I handled this wrong or if I finally stood up for myself after swallowing my feelings for too long. I'm a 26-year-old woman living in Chicago, and I've been with my boyfriend for a little over 2 years. His name is Tyler, he's 28, and we've been living together for about 8 months. We split rent and utilities evenly. The lease is in both of our names, and on paper it feels like a shared home. In reality, lately it's felt more like I'm a guest in a space he's slowly claiming as his. When we first moved in together, things were great. We talked a lot about boundaries, guests, schedules, and how we both wanted our apartment to feel comfortable. I'm more social than Tyler. I like having friends over for dinner, movie nights, or just hanging out and talking. He's social too, but in a different way. His friends tend to come over to watch sports, drink beer, play video games, and stay late. I didn't mind that at all because I like most of his friends, and I understood that this was our shared space. The problem started a couple of months ago, and it didn't happen all at once. It was little comments at first. Tyler would sigh when I mentioned that my friends were coming over. He'd say things like, "Do they have to come here?" Or, "Can't you guys go out instead?" I brushed it off because everyone has off days, and I didn't want to be dramatic. For context, my closest friends are Megan, Alicia, and Brooke. We've known each other since college, and they're honestly like family to me. They're not loud, they don't trash the place, and they always ask before coming over. Most of the time, we cook together, sit on the couch, and talk. We're usually done by 10 or 11 p.m. because we all work. Tyler's friends are Jason, Mark, and Ethan. They're not bad guys, but they're much louder. When they come over, it's almost always last minute. Tyler will text me an hour before and say something like, "The guys are coming over to watch the game." They'll stay until 1 or 2 a.m., leave empty cans everywhere, and sometimes I'm the one who ends up cleaning because Tyler crashes as soon as they leave. I tried to be patient because I didn't want to keep score in a relationship. I kept telling myself that living together means compromise. The turning point happened about 3 weeks ago. Megan had just gone through a rough breakup, and I told Tyler that she and Alicia were coming over on Saturday night so we could cook dinner and watch a movie. I told him this on Tuesday. He said okay, but he didn't sound thrilled. Saturday comes, and about an hour before my friends are supposed to arrive, Tyler tells me he doesn't want them over. He said he had a long week and wanted a quiet night at home. I reminded him that I told him days ago and that Megan was really struggling. He rolled his eyes and said, "It's always something with your friends." That comment hurt, but I tried to stay calm. I told him we'd keep it low-key and that they wouldn't be late. He didn't respond, just shrugged and went back to his phone. My friends came over, and everything was exactly as I promised. We cooked, talked, laughed quietly, and watched a movie. Around 10 p.m., Tyler disappeared into the bedroom and shut the door. Megan noticed and asked if everything was okay. I lied and said he was tired. The next morning, Tyler was cold. He barely spoke to me. Finally, when I asked what was wrong, he said he felt disrespected and that I ignored his feelings by having my friends over anyway. I reminded him that he regularly has his friends over, often without much notice. He said that was different. That's when he dropped the bomb that really pushed me over the edge. He said he didn't want my friends coming over anymore, at least not regularly. He said our apartment didn't feel peaceful when they were there and that it stressed him out. He suggested that if I wanted to see them, I should go to their places instead. I honestly thought he was joking at first. I asked him if he was serious, and he said yes. I asked him if that rule applied to his friends too, and he said no, because they were his people and he needed time with them at home. I felt my stomach drop. It suddenly clicked that this wasn't about peace or stress. This was about control and convenience. I told him that wasn't fair and that this was our place, not just his. He said he pays rent too and has a right to be comfortable. I agreed, but I told him comfort goes both ways. He kept insisting that my friends were the problem. He said they judged him, even though they've always been polite. He said they took over the living room, even though his friends do the same thing. He said it was different because his friends are guys, and it's more relaxed. That comment alone made my blood boil. I tried to explain how hurtful it felt that he was trying to ban my friends while continuing to invite his without limits. He accused me of exaggerating and said I was making him the bad guy. The argument escalated, and I'll admit I finally snapped. I told him that if he was going to keep inviting his friends over whenever he wanted, then he had no right to tell me I couldn't have mine over. I told him that if he insisted on banning my friends, then his friends would also be banned, or we'd have to set equal rules for both of us. He stared at me like I had just betrayed him. He said I was being unreasonable and selfish. He said a good girlfriend would prioritize her partner's comfort over friends. That comment hurt more than anything else he said. I told him that a good partner doesn't isolate the person they love from their support system. I didn't yell, but my voice was shaking. I told him I felt like I was slowly being pushed out of my own home. He went quiet after that. He said I was overreacting and that I was turning a small issue into a huge fight. Then he left to cool off and didn't come back until late that night. Since then, things have been tense. He hasn't apologized, and neither have I. He keeps acting like I crossed a line by calling him out. I keep replaying the argument in my head, wondering if I should have handled it differently or if I should have stayed calmer. What's messing with my head is that part of me feels guilty. I love him, and I don't want constant conflict. But another part of me feels like if I give in on this, I'm setting a precedent that my needs come second. I keep thinking about how easily he dismissed my friendships, like they were an inconvenience instead of an important part of my life. I've talked to Brooke about it, and she told me it sounds like he's trying to control the space, and, by extension, me. She said it's a red flag. At the same time, Tyler keeps saying I'm painting him as controlling when he's just asking for peace in his own home. I don't know where the line is between compromise and losing yourself. I don't know if I should stand my ground harder or try to find a middle ground before this turns into something bigger. So here I am, questioning everything. Am I wrong for telling my boyfriend he can't ban my friends from our place if he keeps inviting his? Or am I finally standing up for myself in a situation that's been quietly unfair for a long time? Update. My boyfriend tried to ban my friends from our place, but keeps inviting his. A lot has happened since I first wrote this, and I honestly didn't expect things to escalate the way they did. I read through so many comments and sat with them longer than I thought I would. Some of them were hard to read, especially the ones pointing out patterns I didn't want to admit were there. I didn't show Tyler the post, but it gave me clarity that I clearly didn't have before. A few days after the argument, the tension was unbearable. We were both polite but distant, like roommates avoiding each other. He kept acting like nothing serious had happened, which somehow made it worse. Finally, I told him we needed to talk because I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. We sat down at the kitchen table, and I told him calmly that this wasn't just about friends coming over. I explained that I felt like my space was shrinking and like my needs were being treated as optional. I told him I felt disrespected and unheard, especially when he suggested that a good girlfriend should put her friends second. At first, he doubled down. He said I was twisting his words and that I was being dramatic. He said I was letting outside opinions influence me and turning him into the villain. That stung, but I didn't back down this time. I told him that my feelings didn't come from the internet. They came from living in the same apartment and feeling uncomfortable in my own home. That's when the conversation shifted in a way I didn't expect. He admitted that he doesn't really like my friends, not because of anything they've done, but because they make him feel insecure. He said when they're around, he feels judged and left out, even if they aren't doing anything wrong. Hearing that actually made me feel sad for him, but it didn't excuse his behavior. I told him I understood insecurity, but trying to ban my friends wasn't the solution. I asked him how he would feel if I told him his friends weren't welcome anymore. He went quiet for a long time before saying he would be furious and hurt. I asked him why he expected me to accept something he wouldn't. He didn't have a good answer. Instead, he said that living together was harder than he expected and that he thought once we moved in, I wouldn't need my friends as much. That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. I asked him to repeat it, and he did, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I told him that was never going to be healthy and that my friends aren't a phase or a replacement for him. They're part of who I am. I told him that asking me to reduce my friendships for the sake of his comfort crossed a line. That's when things got really real. He accused me of choosing my friends over him. I told him I wasn't choosing anyone over anyone else. I was choosing balance and respect. I reminded him that I've never asked him to stop seeing his friends, even when their visits disrupted my sleep or left me cleaning up the next day. He got defensive and said I should have spoken up sooner if it bothered me. He wasn't wrong about that, and I owned it. I told him I should have said something earlier, but that didn't mean my feelings now were invalid. The conversation ended without a neat resolution, but for the first time, he agreed that banning my friends outright was unfair. He suggested setting rules for both of us. Same notice, same frequency, same expectations for cleanup and noise. On the surface, that sounded reasonable, but something still felt off. Over the next week, I paid attention to how he acted, not what he promised. He followed the new rules technically, but his attitude changed whenever my friends were mentioned. He'd sigh, make comments under his breath, or suddenly have plans of his own. Meanwhile, he seemed annoyed that he now had to give notice before his friends came over. One night, Megan came by just to talk because she was having a rough day. Tyler stayed in the bedroom the entire time. After she left, he told me he felt pushed aside in his own home. I reminded him that he chose not to join us. He said he didn't feel welcome, even though no one excluded him. That was the moment I realized this wasn't actually about guests at all. It was about control, emotional dependence, and expectations that I hadn't agreed to. A few days later, I asked him a question I'd been afraid to ask. I asked him if he saw us as equals in this relationship. He hesitated before saying yes, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I spent the night at Brooke's place after that conversation. I told Tyler I needed space to think. He didn't fight me on it, which surprised me. While I was there, I replayed the last 2 years in my head. The little comments, the way he'd get annoyed when I made plans without him, the times he joked about being all I needed. None of it seemed alarming on its own, but together it painted a picture I couldn't ignore anymore. When I went back to the apartment, I told him I wasn't ready to continue living together under these conditions. I said I needed a partner who respected my independence, not someone who saw it as a threat. He got quiet again, then angry. He said I was throwing everything away over something small. I told him it wasn't small to me. We're currently figuring out logistics. The lease complicates things, but I'm working on options. He's been oscillating between apologetic and defensive, and I don't know yet where this will land. What I do know is that I don't feel crazy anymore. I still love him, but love isn't enough if respect is missing. For the first time since this started, I feel grounded in my decision to speak up, even if it costs me comfort in the short term. I don't know exactly what the future looks like, but I know I don't want to disappear inside a relationship just to keep the peace. Update. My boyfriend tried to ban my friends from our place, but keeps inviting his. This will be my final update, because things have finally settled enough that I can see the situation clearly, even if it still hurts. After I told Tyler I wasn't sure I could keep living together, the apartment felt heavy in a way I can't fully describe. We were still polite, still functioning, but there was a distance that didn't go away. A week passed where we barely spoke beyond logistics. During that time, I talked a lot with people I trust. Not just Brooke and Megan, but also my older cousin Laura, who has been married for years and doesn't sugarcoat anything. She asked me a simple question that stuck with me. She asked if I felt like myself in my own home. I realized the answer was no. I felt smaller. I felt like I was constantly checking how much space I was taking up emotionally and socially. The final conversation with Tyler happened on a Tuesday night. I asked him to sit down with me, and I told him I needed honesty, even if it was uncomfortable. I asked him if he truly believed he was wrong about trying to limit my friends. He paused, then said he still felt like my friendships competed with our relationship. That was the moment I knew this wasn't something we could talk our way out of. I told him I didn't want a relationship where love meant shrinking my world. I told him I wanted a partner who added to my life, not one who tried to become the center of it. He said he felt like I was giving up too easily. I told him I felt like I had been compromising for a long time without realizing it. He admitted something that made everything click into place. He said he liked when it was just us because he felt more secure. He said my independence made him anxious and that he thought living together would naturally make me rely on him more. Hearing that out loud felt sobering, not because he said it cruelly, but because he said it honestly. I told him I wasn't willing to build a future on that foundation. I said I cared about him, but I couldn't keep teaching someone how to respect me. He asked if there was any way to fix it. I told him that maybe there was, but not while living together and not while he saw my support system as a threat. That night, we agreed to separate. There was no screaming, no dramatic exit, just a quiet understanding that this wasn't working the way it needed to. The lease was the hardest part. After some uncomfortable but necessary conversations with the landlord, we worked out a solution where Tyler kept the apartment and I paid a portion of the early termination fee. It wasn't ideal financially, but the relief I felt once the decision was made told me it was the right one. Moving out was emotional. Packing up my things made me grieve the version of the future I thought we were building. Tyler tried to help, and at one point, he apologized again. This time it felt sincere, but it also felt late. I thanked him and told him I hoped he worked through his insecurities, genuinely. I moved in temporarily with Brooke while I looked for a new place. The first night there, we stayed up talking and laughing, and I realized how much I had missed feeling completely at ease. No walking on eggshells. No guilt for existing fully. Tyler and I have gone no contact for now, aside from a few logistical messages. I don't hate him. I don't think he's a monster. I think he's someone who needs to do a lot of growing, and I'm no longer willing to be collateral damage while he figures that out. What I've learned from all of this is that control doesn't always look loud or obvious. Sometimes it looks like reasonable requests that slowly chip away at your autonomy. Sometimes it looks like being told your needs matter, as long as they don't inconvenience someone else. I don't feel like in a hole anymore. I feel like someone who finally listened to her instincts before they went completely quiet. If anyone reading this sees even a small piece of their own relationship in my story, I hope you ask yourself the hard questions sooner than I did. Stories number 6. My coworker loves to say she's just being honest, and I finally showed her what that can feel like. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to snap at work or intentionally make someone uncomfortable, but here I am, replaying everything in my head and wondering if I crossed a line or if I simply matched someone else's energy for once. This whole situation has been building for months, and I think that's what makes it so messy. On paper, it probably sounds petty. Living it day after day felt like death by 1,000 tiny comments. I work in a mid-sized office for a logistics company in the US. I'm 31 and I've been here for a little over 3 years. The job is fine, not my dream, but stable, decent pay, normal hours. My team is small, 8 people total, and we all work pretty closely together. One of those people is a woman named Heather. She's in her early 40s, has been with the company longer than I have, and prides herself on being blunt. That's her word for it, blunt. Everyone else uses different words, but she always falls back on the same defense. I'm just being honest. At first, I thought Heather was just socially awkward. When I started, she commented on how quiet I was, how I dressed very plain, how I didn't talk much in meetings. She said these things with a laugh, like they were harmless observations. I laughed along because that's what you do when you're new and you don't want to be labeled difficult. I told myself she probably didn't mean anything by it. Over time, the comments didn't stop. They just shifted. When I started speaking up more in meetings, she'd say things like, "Wow, you're talkative today," or "Who replaced you with the confident version?" If I brought in leftovers for lunch, she'd peer at my container and say I could never eat that much carbs at work. I'd feel gross all day. If I wore makeup, she'd ask what the special occasion was. If I didn't, she'd ask if I was feeling tired or sick. Every single time someone looked uncomfortable, she'd smile and say, "Relax, I'm just being honest." Management loved her because she got results and never sugarcoated things. HR loved her because she never used outright insults. It was always framed as observations, jokes, honesty. I tried ignoring it. I tried killing her with kindness. I tried changing the subject. Nothing worked. If anything, my silence seemed to encourage her. It was like she enjoyed poking people and seeing how much they tolerate. The moment I realized it wasn't just me was during a team lunch a few months ago. One of my coworkers, Jenna, was talking about her upcoming wedding. She showed us a picture of her dress on her phone. Heather leaned over, squinted at the screen, and said, "That's brave. Strapless would never work for my arms. The table went quiet. Jenna laughed awkwardly and said she loved it. Heather shrugged and said, "Hey, I'm just being honest." I remember looking around the table and seeing the same tight smiles I'd worn so many times. That was when something shifted for me. I stopped seeing Heather as awkward or clueless. She knew exactly what she was doing. She liked being the person who said the thing no one else would say, even if it hurt. Things came to a head last week during a project review. I'd been leading a new client onboarding, and it had gone well. Our manager praised the process I put together and asked me to walk the team through it. I did, feeling proud and a little nervous. When I finished, Heather leaned back in her chair and said honestly, "I'm surprised you pulled this off. I didn't think you had it in you." The room went silent. My face burned. Our manager cleared his throat and moved the meeting along, but the damage was done. Afterward, Heather caught up with me near the copier and said, "Don't take it personally. I just believe in being honest." I went home that night furious, not explosive angry, but simmering. I replayed every comment she'd made over the years. I realized how small I'd made myself to avoid rocking the boat. I also realized something else. Heather never liked honesty when it went the other direction. She got defensive over the smallest perceived criticism. She could dish it out endlessly, but couldn't take it at all. The next morning, I didn't plan anything dramatic. I just decided I was done absorbing it quietly. If she wanted honesty, I could do honesty. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. We were in the break room, just the two of us, making coffee. Heather started complaining about a presentation she'd given the day before. She said the client seemed bored, and that people just don't appreciate straightforward communication anymore. Then she looked at me and said, "You probably thought it was boring too, didn't you?" I paused. Normally, I would have laughed and said no. Instead, I said, "Since we're being honest, yeah, I did. I think you had good points, but you talked over them and didn't really read the room." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. I kept going, my heart pounding. I said sometimes your honesty comes across as condescending, and I think that's why people shut down instead of engaging. Her mouth opened and closed. She said, "Wow, that's kind of rude." I shrugged and said, "I'm just being honest." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Later that day, during lunch with a few coworkers, Heather started in on someone else, a guy named Marcus, about how he always eats at his desk like he's hiding from people. He laughed it off, but I could see he was uncomfortable. Without really thinking, I said maybe he just doesn't enjoy commentary on his habits. Heather turned to me sharply and asked what that was supposed to mean. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Honestly, you make a lot of comments about people that feel unnecessary. You might think it's harmless, but it puts people on edge." The table went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the vending machine. Heather's face flushed red. She said she couldn't believe I was attacking her and that she was just trying to lighten the mood. I said I wasn't attacking her. I was just being honest, the same way she always is with us. She got up and walked out. Within an hour, I was called into our manager's office. Heather had already been there. He asked me to explain what happened. I told him everything, not just that day, but the pattern of comments over years. I told him how often Heather used honesty as a shield to say whatever she wanted without consequences. I told him how uncomfortable it made me and others feel. I didn't yell. I didn't insult her. I just laid it out plainly. Our manager listened, which surprised me. He said Heather had mentioned feeling ganged up on and disrespected. I said that's how she makes other people feel regularly. I said I matched her tone once, and she escalated it to management immediately. I asked him why honesty was acceptable one way, but not the other. He didn't have a great answer. He said he'd look into it and asked me to keep things professional. Since then, the office has been weird. Heather barely speaks to me unless necessary. When she does, she's curt and stiff. She hasn't made any of her usual comments to anyone, at least not in front of me. A few coworkers have quietly thanked me. Jenna told me she wished she'd said something during the wedding dress comment. Marcus told me the break room feels less tense now. At the same time, I feel guilty. I don't like confrontation. I don't like being the person who makes things awkward. Part of me wonders if I should have handled it privately or gone straight to HR instead of calling her out publicly. Another part of me is angry that I'm the one questioning myself when she's been doing this unchecked for years. I didn't insult her appearance. I didn't mock her. I didn't raise my voice. I used her exact language and her exact justification. And the moment she felt the sting of it, she couldn't handle it. So now I'm stuck in this uncomfortable middle space. Things are calmer, but colder. Heather avoids me, which is honestly a relief, but I know she sees herself as the victim. I keep replaying it, wondering if there was a better way, or if this was inevitable. I don't know if I'm proud of how I handled it, or just tired enough to stop caring. All I know is that I finally stopped shrinking myself to make someone else comfortable, and the fallout has been complicated. I'm still asking myself if standing up this way makes me the problem, or if it just exposed one that was already there. Update: my coworker loves to say she's just being honest, and I finally showed her what that can feel like. I didn't expect things to escalate the way they did after I last wrote, and I definitely didn't expect to learn how much history there really was behind Heather's behavior. The silence in the office didn't last long, even though it felt heavy at first. For about a week after everything, Heather kept to herself. She did her work, spoke only when necessary, and avoided eye contact with me completely. Part of me hoped that would be the new normal and that everyone could just move on. That didn't happen. About 10 days later, I got an email from HR asking me to come in for a meeting. No details, just a time and a conference room. My stomach dropped as soon as I saw it. Even though I knew I hadn't yelled or insulted anyone, I also knew how these things tend to go. The person who speaks up often ends up under more scrutiny than the person who's been quietly causing issues for years. When I walked into the meeting, Heather was already there, along with our manager and an HR rep named Allison. The mood was tense. Heather looked upset in a very controlled way, like she'd been rehearsing her talking points. Allison explained that multiple concerns had been raised about workplace communication and professionalism, and they wanted to address everything together. Heather went first. She said she felt targeted and undermined. She said she'd always been open and honest at work, and that suddenly her personality was being framed as hostile. She said my comments embarrassed her in front of coworkers and made her feel unsafe expressing herself. Hearing the word unsafe used that way made my jaw tighten, but I stayed quiet. Then it was my turn. I told them I never intended to embarrass her, but I also explained that her version of honesty had consistently come at other people's expense. I gave specific examples, including comments she made to me over the years and what she said to Jenna and Marcus. I explained how often she dismissed people's discomfort by laughing and saying she was just being honest. I also pointed out that the moment that same approach was turned toward her, it became a problem serious enough to involve HR. Allison asked Heather if she remembered making those comments. Heather admitted she did, but said they were jokes and observations, not attacks. Allison asked if anyone had ever told her they were uncomfortable before. Heather hesitated, then said no, not directly. That's when I said quietly that several of us hadn't felt safe enough to push back because of how she reacts to criticism. That seemed to shift the tone. Allison asked if I knew of others who felt similarly. I said yes, but that it wasn't my place to name them. Our manager chimed in and said he'd received informal complaints over the years about Heather's communication style, but hadn't considered it a pattern until now. The meeting ended with HR saying they'd follow up individually and reminding everyone about workplace respect policies. It felt unresolved, but also like something had finally cracked open. Over the next week, things got even more complicated. 2 coworkers approached HR on their own. One of them was Jenna. She told me later that hearing me speak up made her realize she wasn't imagining how bad the comments felt. Another coworker, Paul, apparently brought up things Heather had said to him about his weight and his divorce. None of us knew the others were doing it at the same time, which somehow made it more powerful. Heather was pulled into several more meetings. When she came back to her desk after the last one, she looked exhausted and angry. She stopped making personal comments entirely, not just to me, but to everyone. Her emails became overly formal. Her tone in meetings shifted from blunt to clipped and defensive. Then, a few days ago, something unexpected happened. Heather asked if she could talk to me privately. I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. We went into an empty conference room. She looked uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before. She said she'd been told by HR that her communication style was being documented and that she was required to attend coaching sessions. She said she felt blindsided and angry, but also confused. Then she said something that surprised me. She said she never realized how often people took her comments personally. She said growing up, her family communicated the same way and that she thought she was helping people by being honest instead of fake. She admitted that when I mirrored her behavior, it felt humiliating and cruel, and that she didn't understand how it could be the same thing. I told her that was exactly the point. I told her that honesty without empathy can feel like an attack, even if that's not the intention. I also told her that it wasn't my responsibility to teach her that, and that I spoke up because I was tired of feeling small. She didn't apologize outright, but she did say she wished I had gone to her privately first. I told her honestly that I didn't feel safe doing that, based on how she reacts to criticism. She went quiet after that. Since then, the office atmosphere has changed. It's not perfect, but it's lighter. People speak more freely. Meetings feel less tense. Heather still works here, and we coexist professionally, but there's a clear distance now. She's careful with her words, sometimes painfully so, but I'd rather that than the constant jabs disguised as jokes. As for me, I've been doing a lot of reflecting. I still feel a twinge of guilt sometimes, especially when I see Heather sitting alone at lunch. I don't like that someone is hurting, even if their behavior caused it. But I also remind myself that her discomfort is the result of accountability, not cruelty. I've also noticed something in myself has changed. I speak up more easily now, not just with Heather, but in general. I don't automatically swallow my reactions to keep the peace. That feels both empowering and a little scary. I don't know how this will look months from now. Maybe Heather will genuinely learn and grow. Maybe she'll resent me forever. What I do know is that I finally learned that matching someone's so-called honesty isn't the same as being malicious. Sometimes it's the only way to make a pattern visible. I'm still sitting with the question of whether I handled everything perfectly. I don't think I did, but I also don't think staying silent would have been better. For the first time, I feel like the office sees me as someone with a voice instead of someone who just absorbs whatever is thrown at her, and that alone feels like a step forward. Stories number 7. My parents raised me to be the good daughter, and I hate them for it. I feel disgusting even typing that title. I've deleted and rewritten this so many times because it sounds ungrateful and cruel and dramatic, but the feeling won't go away no matter how much I try to bury it. I don't hate my parents because they were abusive or absent or cruel in obvious ways. I hate them because they made me good. Quiet. Responsible. Easy. And I don't know who I am outside of that. I'm the oldest daughter. If you know, you know. From the time I was little, I was praised for being mature, for being helpful, for not causing trouble. Adults loved me. Teachers loved me. Family members used me as an example. My parents would smile and say I was their easy one. I wore that label like a badge of honor because it felt like love. I learned early that love was conditional, even if no one ever said it out loud. Love came when I didn't complain. Love came when I understood instead of needing to be understood. Love came when I did what was expected without being asked. I watched my siblings act out, argue, fail, and still get comforted. I watched them be allowed to be messy. I learned that my role was to hold everything together. If my parents were tired, I didn't ask for help. If they were stressed, I made myself smaller. If something hurt my feelings, I swallowed it because I didn't want to be a problem. I became the emotional buffer in our family without realizing it. I anticipated moods. I smoothed conflicts. I translated emotions. I was praised for being selfless, but no one asked what it cost me. The thing that makes me feel the grossest is that I didn't just accept this role. I excelled at it. I chased that approval. I liked being the one they didn't worry about. I liked being trusted. I liked being needed. It felt safer than risking disappointment. But now that I'm older, I'm realizing how much of myself I never got to explore because I was too busy being good. I don't know how to ask for things without feeling guilty. I don't know how to say no without panic rising in my chest. I don't know how to rest without feeling lazy. I apologize for things that aren't my fault. I feel responsible for other people's emotions. I constantly feel like I'm one mistake away from letting everyone down. And the worst part is that my parents still don't see it. They talk about how proud they are of me, how strong I am, how independent I am. They say things like, "You've always been so easy, you never gave us trouble, we never had to worry about you." Every time they say that, something inside me twists. Because what I hear is, "You didn't need us. You didn't take up space. You didn't ask for too much." I've tried bringing this up gently. I've said things like, "Sometimes I felt a lot of pressure growing up," or "I didn't always feel like I could mess up." They look genuinely confused. They say they never meant to put pressure on me. They say I was just naturally responsible. They say I'm reading too much into it, and maybe I am. But intention doesn't erase impact. I look at my siblings now, and I feel resentment that scares me. They're allowed to struggle openly. They're allowed to be supported. They're allowed to fail and be caught. When I struggle, it's invisible. When I break down, it's quiet. I've trained everyone to believe I'll always be fine, including myself. I hate that I feel angry when my parents praise me. I hate that compliments feel like chains. I hate that being called strong feels like being told I'm not allowed to be weak. I hate that I don't know how to let people take care of me. I hate that I feel safest when I'm useful. What really pushed me to write this is realizing how this has followed me into every relationship. Friendships where I'm the listener, the fixer, the dependable one. Romantic relationships where I overgive and underask. Situations where I stay too long because leaving would disappoint someone. I don't know how to exist without earning my place. Sometimes I imagine what it would have been like to be difficult, to slam doors, to say no, to need comfort and actually receive it. And then I feel ashamed for even thinking that. Because my parents did their best, and they sacrificed a lot, and they love me in the ways they know how. That's the part that makes this so complicated. I love them. I know they love me. There's no villain here, just a quiet kind of damage that no one noticed because it looked like success. I became exactly who they wanted, and now I don't know how to want things for myself. I'm angry at them, but I'm also grieving the version of me that never got to be imperfect without fear. I'm grieving the child who learned that being good was safer than being honest. I'm grieving the fact that I don't know how to stop performing even when no one is watching. I don't know what to do with this anger yet. I don't want to explode or accuse or rewrite my childhood as something it wasn't. I just want someone to acknowledge that being the good daughter can be a cage, that praise can be pressure, that responsibility can be a burden when it's never chosen. I feel gross admitting all of this because it feels like betrayal. But pretending I'm grateful all the time is starting to feel like another performance. I don't hate my parents as people. I hate the role they helped mold me into, and I don't know how to step out of it without feeling like I'm doing something wrong. I'm tired of being good if it means disappearing. I'm tired of being strong if it means being alone. I don't know who I am without that identity yet, But I'm starting to realize that if I don't figure it out, I'll keep resenting the people who never asked me to carry this much in the first place. Update. My parents raised me to be the good daughter, and I hate them for it. I didn't expect the aftermath of writing this to hit me the way it did. I thought getting it out would make the feelings quieter, but instead it opened something I had spent years keeping sealed. I started noticing how deeply this role is stitched into my daily life, not just with my parents, but with everyone around me. After I posted, I went to visit my parents for a weekend that had already been planned. I almost canceled, but I didn't want to make a decision out of fear. Being there felt different this time. I was hyper aware of how I moved through the house, how I anticipated needs before they were spoken, how I automatically cleaned up after everyone without thinking, how my body reacted with tension when my mother sighed or my father looked tired. None of this was new, but seeing it clearly made it exhausting. At one point, my mom joked that it was so nice having me home because things just ran smoother. She meant it as a compliment. Everyone laughed. I smiled automatically, but something inside me snapped quietly. I realized how deeply that sentence summarized my entire role. I wasn't there to rest or be cared for. I was there to make things easier. Later that night, I tried again to explain how I've been feeling. I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I said that I felt like I was never allowed to struggle growing up and that it still affects me. My dad got defensive immediately. He said they worked hard to give us a good life and that I turned out great, so he didn't understand why I was upset. My mom looked hurt and said she didn't know what I wanted from them now. That conversation ended the same way these always do, with me reassuring them that I wasn't blaming them, with me comforting them for feeling bad, with me swallowing what I wanted to say so no one would feel uncomfortable. I drove home feeling hollow and angry at myself for doing exactly what I always do. What changed after that visit is that I stopped pretending I didn't notice the pattern. At work, I caught myself volunteering for extra tasks even when I was overwhelmed. With friends, I noticed how rarely anyone checked in on me emotionally. Not because they don't care, but because I've trained them not to worry. When someone asked how I was and I said fine, I realized I didn't even know how to say anything else. The hardest part has been sitting with the resentment without turning it inward. My instinct is to tell myself I'm dramatic, ungrateful, selfish. But I'm learning that anger doesn't always mean someone did something malicious. Sometimes it just means something hurt for a long time and never had space to be acknowledged. I also had a conversation with one of my siblings that surprised me. I didn't go into detail, but I mentioned feeling like I always had to be responsible growing up. They laughed and said, "Yeah, you were basically the third parent." They said it so casually, like it was obvious and harmless. I laughed too, but later I cried, because it confirmed what I've been trying not to admit. Everyone saw it. Everyone accepted it. No one thought to stop it. I've started making small changes that feel huge. Saying no to things without explaining myself. Letting silence exist when someone else is uncomfortable. Not jumping in to fix emotions that aren't mine. It feels wrong in my body, like I'm doing something rude or dangerous. But nothing bad has happened yet. The world hasn't collapsed. People are adjusting, even if awkwardly. I'm still angry at my parents, but the anger is changing shape. It's less sharp and more sad. I see them now as people who did what worked for them and didn't realize who it would cost. I don't know if they'll ever fully understand this, and I'm trying to accept that closure might not come from them. What I do know is that I can't keep living as the version of myself that only exists to be easy. I don't want to disappear quietly anymore. I don't want praise that comes at the expense of my own needs. I'm starting to learn that being good should not mean being invisible. I still feel gross admitting all of this. That feeling hasn't gone away yet. But I also feel something else creeping in underneath it. A sense that my anger might actually be protecting something important. A part of me that deserved care too. And maybe, finally, I'm starting to listen to her. Final update. My parents raised me to be the good daughter, and I hate them for it. I waited a long time before writing this because I wanted to know whether what I was feeling was just another emotional wave or something more permanent. I think I finally understand now that it's not about anger burning itself out. It's about integration. This part of me isn't going away, and that doesn't mean something is wrong. Since my last update, I've kept practicing small acts of resistance against the role I was raised in. They still feel unnatural, but they don't feel impossible anymore. I stopped automatically responding to family group chats. I let calls go to voicemail. I didn't rush to explain myself. No emergencies happened. No one fell apart. That alone taught me more than years of self-reflection ever did. I had one more conversation with my parents, not because I thought it would fix everything, but because I needed to say things without managing their reactions. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry. I told them that I loved them and that I know they did their best, but that, being the good daughter, came at a cost they never had to pay. I told them that I learned very early that being low maintenance was safer than being honest. I didn't ask them to agree. I didn't ask them to apologize. I just said it and let the silence sit. My mom cried quietly. My dad didn't say much. He said he was sorry if I felt that way, which used to make me feel invalidated, but this time it didn't derail me. I realized something important in that moment. Their capacity to understand doesn't determine the validity of my experience. That was a hard lesson, but also a freeing one. After that, something shifted. Not in them, but in me. I stopped waiting for permission to feel differently about my childhood. I stopped needing them to name the harm before I could heal from it. I allowed myself to hold two truths at the same time: that my parents loved me, and that I was still hurt. I've also noticed changes in my relationships. Some friendships became quieter when I stopped being the emotional backbone. That hurt more than I expected, but it also clarified a lot. A few people stepped up in ways I didn't anticipate. One friend told me she didn't realize how much I hid behind being capable. Hearing that made me feel seen in a way I'm still adjusting to. The resentment toward my siblings has softened too. Not because it wasn't real, but because I finally understand that we were all shaped differently by the same household. They weren't given less responsibility because they were loved more. I was given more because I was capable, and that distinction matters, even if the outcome still hurt. I'm learning how to need people without apologizing for it. I'm learning that rest is not something I have to earn. I'm learning that being disappointed in my parents doesn't make me disloyal. It makes me honest. And honesty is something I was never taught how to practice for myself. I don't hate my parents in the way I thought I did. What I hated was the silence around my own needs. I hated how invisible I became to survive. I hated that being praised for being good meant I never learned how to be messy without shame. Naming that no longer feels gross. It feels necessary. I don't know exactly who I am outside of being the good daughter yet. That part is still forming. But I do know that I'm allowed to take up space now. I'm allowed to disappoint people. I'm allowed to be cared for without proving my worth first. This isn't a clean ending where everything is resolved and everyone understands each other perfectly. It's quieter than that. It's me choosing not to abandon myself anymore, even when it feels uncomfortable. Especially when it feels uncomfortable. Stories number 8. My dumb drunk self hid $3,000 from sober me, and now I'm losing my mind. I am writing this because I genuinely feel like I am being gaslit by a past version of myself, and it is driving me insane. I am 31 years old. I live in Colorado. I work a decent job. I pay my bills on time, and I consider myself a responsible adult most of the time. Apparently, drunk me does not share that opinion. 2 weekends ago, I went out with some friends from work. Nothing unusual. We were celebrating a promotion my coworker Brian got. I told myself I would have 2 drinks max. I lied to myself like I apparently do often. 1 drink turned into shots. Shots turned into bar hopping. By the end of the night, my memory is spotty at best. What I do remember is that earlier that day, I had withdrawn $3,000 in cash from my savings. Before anyone asks why, it was for a private sale purchase. I was supposed to buy a used motorcycle from a guy named Trevor the next morning. He only wanted cash. I am not rich, so $3,000 is a lot of money to me. I remember putting the envelope in my backpack and telling myself not to forget it. I woke up the next morning with a hangover from hell and immediate panic. My backpack was on the floor. The envelope was not inside. I tore my apartment apart. I checked every pocket, every drawer, under the couch, inside shoes, inside the fridge, because drunk logic. Nothing. I canceled on Trevor because I could not admit I lost the money. I told him there was a family emergency. He was annoyed, but whatever. I then spent the entire day retracing my steps. I checked my bank app like an idiot, even though I knew I withdrew the cash. I checked my car. I checked the hallway cameras in my building to see if I dropped anything. No envelope. The worst part is that I live alone. No roommates, no pets. No one could have taken it. That means I either lost it outside or hid it somewhere so well that sober me cannot find it. That thought is what is killing me. I started getting paranoid. I called the bar. They said no cash was turned in. I checked with my friends. None of them saw me with an envelope, which makes sense because I probably hid it before we even started drinking. I even wondered for a second if I hallucinated withdrawing the money, but my bank statement shut that idea down fast. 3 days passed. I barely slept. I was snapping at people. I skipped meals. Every time I sat down, my brain screamed, "Where did you put it?" I started searching again, slower this time. I opened books. I shook pillows. I dumped out trash bags even though I knew I had not taken the trash out that week. On day 4, I had a breakdown. I sat on my kitchen floor and just stared at the wall. $3,000 is months of savings for me. It is my emergency fund. Losing it felt like I had sabotaged my own future. I actually considered that maybe I had been robbed and just did not remember, which is terrifying. That night, I decided to think like drunk me. I asked myself where drunk me would think is a genius hiding spot. Somewhere safe. Somewhere obvious, but not obvious. Somewhere I would definitely remember later, except I clearly did not. I started checking places I originally dismissed. I pulled out my winter coats even though it is summer. Nothing. I checked inside my toolbox. Nothing. Then I went into my closet and looked at the top shelf. I have a locked fireproof document box up there. I keep my passport and birth certificate in it. I had already checked it once, but this time I noticed something. The box was slightly crooked. I unlocked it. Inside, under my documents, was the envelope. $3,000 in cash, exactly as I withdrew it. I just sat there laughing and crying at the same time like a lunatic. Here is the thing though. I do not remember putting it there at all. Not even a flicker of memory. That scares me. Drunk me apparently made a smart decision to protect the money, but forgot to inform sober me. Drunk me also locked the box and put the key back on my keyring like some kind of evil genius. I feel relieved, but also unsettled. If I had not found it, I might have torn my life apart over this. I keep thinking about what else drunk me has done that sober me does not know about yet. I check my phone, my messages, my emails, my credit report, everything. I have not told many people this because it sounds ridiculous, but I am seriously reconsidering my relationship with alcohol. This was not funny. This was days of stress, panic, and self-hatred caused by my own actions. I got my money back, but I lost a lot of peace of mind. I do not know if this is just a wake-up call, or if I should be more worried about how easily I blacked out and functioned like a separate person. All I know is that I do not trust drunk me anymore, and that might be the most unsettling part of all. Update, my dumb drunk self hid $3,000 from sober me, and now I'm losing my mind. I did not expect to be back here this soon, but a lot has happened since I posted, and my brain has been running non-stop. I read every comment, even the harsh ones, and I think I needed that reality check more than I wanted to admit. After I found the money, I thought the panic would instantly disappear. It didn't. The relief was there, sure, but it was mixed with this heavy anxiety that I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about how calm and logical drunk me apparently was, while sober me was spiraling for days. That disconnect really messed with my head. The morning after I posted, I woke up early and called my older sister Megan. She lives in Arizona and we're close, but I hadn't told her any of this yet because I was embarrassed. I finally told her the whole story, including how scared I felt about the blackout. She didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She got very quiet, which somehow scared me more. Megan reminded me of something I had minimized for years. This wasn't my first blackout. It was just the first one with serious consequences. She brought up past holidays where I didn't remember conversations. Past nights where I insisted I was fine and then had zero memory the next day. I always joked about it. Hearing it laid out like that made it impossible to ignore. That same day, I texted my friend Kyle, who was out with me that night. I asked him straight up how drunk I was. His response hit me hard. He said I didn't seem sloppy or out of control, but I was definitely on autopilot. He said I kept repeating that I needed to keep something safe and that I was being weirdly serious about it. Apparently, I even refused another drink at the last bar because I said I had already handled what mattered. That terrified me, not because it was reckless, but because I was functioning without memory formation. I was making decisions I couldn't recall. That feels dangerous in a way I can't fully explain. I also ended up telling Trevor the truth about why I bailed on buying the motorcycle. I didn't go into every detail, but I admitted I had a personal issue with alcohol that weekend and needed time. He was surprisingly understanding. He even told me he lost a large amount of cash once in his 20s and found it months later in a cereal box. That made me laugh for the first time in days, but it didn't undo the bigger issue. Later that week, I did something I've been avoiding for a long time. I made an appointment with a therapist. I framed it as stress at first, but by the end of the first session, I admitted the truth. I told her about the blackout, the panic, and how unsettled I felt knowing I could function without awareness. She didn't diagnose me or label me. She just said that losing memory while still making decisions is a serious signal, not something to joke about. Since then, I've stopped drinking completely, not as a dramatic declaration, but as an experiment. I told myself 30 days, no alcohol, just to see how I feel. It's only been a short time, but I already notice things. I sleep better. I wake up without dread. My anxiety hasn't vanished, but it's quieter. I moved the money too. It's no longer in my apartment. It's in a safe deposit box at the bank now. I needed that physical separation, like closing a chapter. Every time I saw that envelope, it reminded me how close I came to mentally unraveling. The strangest part of all this is that nothing bad technically happened. I didn't crash a car. I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't lose the money. But I think that's why this shook me so badly. It showed me how easily something worse could happen while I was unaware. I keep thinking about how many times I've said I had things under control. I thought control meant paying bills and showing up to work. I didn't consider that control also means knowing what you did and why you did it. I'm not saying I'll never drink again. I'm not ready to make grand promises. But I am saying I can't pretend this was just a funny story anymore. It stopped being funny the moment I realized I couldn't trust my own memory. Right now, I'm focusing on staying present, staying honest, and not letting drunk me run my life behind the scenes. If nothing else, this experience forced me to pay attention before something truly irreversible happened. Stories number 9. My decision to take my daughter and leave our entire family behind. I never thought I would be the kind of person who packs up a car in the middle of the night and drives across state lines with a child and no clear plan beyond getting away. I used to judge stories like that online and think there had to be more to it, or that the parent was being dramatic. Now I am living it, and I still do not know if I did the right thing. I am 36, and my daughter Madison is 9. I was married to her father Eric for 11 years before we divorced 2 years ago. The divorce itself was not explosive. It was slow and heavy and full of disappointment. We both agreed that we were miserable together, and staying married would only teach Madison the wrong lessons about relationships. After the divorce, Eric moved back in with his parents in Indiana. I stayed in our house in Illinois because it was close to Madison's school and my job. Eric sees Madison every other weekend and one night a week when his schedule allows. On paper, we have a reasonable co-parenting arrangement. The problem is not Eric. The problem is his family. Eric comes from a very tight-knit family that believes blood outweighs everything. His mother, Carol, is the kind of woman who calls herself honest when she is really just cruel. His father, Dennis, barely speaks to me but watches everything like a silent judge. Eric's sister, Ashley, is only 2 years older than me and has never liked me because I was not the woman she imagined for her brother. From the moment Madison was born, his family acted like she belonged to them more than to me. Carol would override my parenting decisions constantly. If I said Madison could not have dessert, Carol would slide her a cookie behind my back. If I said no sleepovers, Carol would say I was being paranoid and invite cousins anyway. Eric never stood up to her. He would just shrug and tell me it was easier to let her have her way. I tried for years to keep the peace. I told myself that having involved grandparents was a good thing. I told myself that biting my tongue was better than starting fights that Madison might witness. I compromised so much that I barely recognized my own boundaries anymore. After the divorce, things got worse. Suddenly, Carol treated me like an obstacle instead of family. She questioned my finances. She questioned my dating, even though I was not dating. She questioned my mental health openly in front of Madison. She would say things like, "Your mom worries too much," or "Your mom is very emotional, isn't she?" Madison started coming home, repeating things that made my stomach drop. She asked me why I hated Grandma Carol. She asked me why I broke up our family. She asked me if I was going to take her away from everyone she loved. I confronted Eric about it. He said his mom was just struggling with the divorce, and I needed to be patient. I told him patience was running out. He promised to talk to her. Nothing changed. The breaking point came 6 months ago. Madison came home from a weekend visit unusually quiet. That night, while I was tucking her in, she asked me if I was sick. I asked her what she meant. She said Grandma Carol said I was unstable, and that sometimes unstable moms lose custody of their kids. I felt something inside me snap. The next day I called Carol and told her she was no longer allowed to speak negatively about me to my daughter. Carol laughed and said Madison needed to know the truth. She said kids do better with fathers anyway. She said if I kept being difficult, maybe the family would have to step in. That night I barely slept. Over the next few weeks, I noticed small changes in Madison. She became anxious before visits. She started asking legal questions no 9-year-old should be thinking about. She asked what a judge does. She asked if kids get to choose where they live. I scheduled a therapy appointment for her. The therapist, Jason, said Madison was experiencing loyalty conflict and anxiety stemming from adult conversations she should not be exposed to. He gently suggested limiting contact with anyone who undermined my role as her primary caregiver. I took that advice seriously. I tried one last time to set boundaries. I emailed Eric and told him Madison would no longer be visiting his parents' house. He could still see her, but not there. He lost it. He accused me of alienation. He accused me of trying to erase his family. Carol sent me a long text saying I was kidnapping Madison emotionally. That was when I started thinking about leaving. I have a cousin, Rachel, in Oregon, who has offered for years for me to come stay with her. She knows about my family situation. She has a spare room and connections in my field. I brushed it off every time because it felt extreme. Suddenly, it did not. I spoke to a lawyer named Thomas. He told me that as long as I followed the custody agreement, I could relocate with Madison, but it would require court approval eventually, He warned me that Eric could fight it. He also said judges look at stability and best interest of the child. I asked Madison how she felt. I did not frame it as escaping or running away. I asked if she liked the idea of living somewhere new. She surprised me by saying yes immediately. She said she was tired of everyone being mad all the time. 2 weeks later, I packed the car while Madison slept. I left Eric a note and sent an email explaining where we were going and that I would contact him once we arrived safely. I did not do it to be cruel. I did it because I was afraid that if I hesitated, I would lose my nerve. The drive was long and quiet. Madison slept a lot. When she was awake, she held my hand. When we arrived, Rachel hugged us like she had been waiting her whole life. Madison smiled more that first week than she had in months. Eric is furious. He has been calling non-stop. He says I tore Madison away from her family. Carol left a voicemail saying I would regret this and that no court would side with the hysterical mother. Ashley posted vague things online about women who use children as weapons. I enrolled Madison in school. I found a temporary remote position through a former coworker named Kevin. Madison's therapist now does video sessions and says Madison seems calmer. Still, the guilt eats at me. Madison misses her dad. I encourage them to video chat. I never speak badly about him. But she does not ask about her grandparents. That both relieves and terrifies me. Some nights I lie awake wondering if I crossed a line. I wonder if I acted out of fear instead of reason. I wonder if a judge will see me as manipulative instead of protective. Other nights, I watch Madison sleeping peacefully, and I know I would do it again. I did not rip my daughter away to punish anyone. I did it because I felt like I was watching her slowly be pulled apart by adult bitterness and control. I did it because every time I tried to stand my ground, I was bulldozed by people who believed family meant ownership. I do not know how this will end. There will be court dates. There will be accusations. There will be consequences. I accept that. What I cannot accept is letting my daughter grow up believing that love means intimidation, or that her mother is unstable for setting boundaries. Update. My decision to take my daughter and leave our entire family behind. It has been a little over 4 months since Madison and I moved to Oregon, and life has settled into something that feels almost normal, which still surprises me when I stop and think about how chaotic everything felt before. The legal side of things moved faster than I expected and slower than I wanted, all at the same time. Eric filed an emergency motion 2 weeks after we arrived, claiming I abducted Madison and violated the custody agreement. I was served papers at Rachel's house, which made everything feel suddenly very real and very frightening. I hired a local attorney named Michelle, who specializes in family law, and she immediately told me to breathe, because nothing about my situation fit the legal definition of abduction. She explained that I had notified Eric of our location, maintained contact, and continued to facilitate communication between him and Madison. The first court hearing was over video. Eric looked angry and exhausted. Carol was sitting behind him, and that alone told the judge a lot, even if nothing was said about it. Eric's lawyer argued that I acted unilaterally and destabilized Madison's life. Michelle countered with documentation from Madison's therapist, screenshots of texts from Carol, and records showing Madison's improved attendance and grades since the move. The judge did not make a final ruling that day, but ordered a temporary arrangement allowing Madison to remain with me while the case continued. Eric was granted extended virtual visitation and the option to visit in person as long as he stayed elsewhere. Carol was explicitly barred from contact pending further review. Hearing that made my knees almost give out. Eric came to visit 2 months later. He stayed in a hotel and took Madison to the zoo and out to dinner. I was nervous the entire time, but Madison came home happy and calm. That was when Eric finally admitted something I had waited years to hear. He said he knew his mother crossed lines, but he did not know how to stop her without blowing up his entire family. He said losing daily access to Madison forced him to see how much control Carol really had. A week after that visit, Eric told me he moved out of his parents' house. He found a small apartment closer to his job. He started individual therapy. I do not know if any of that would have happened if I had stayed. Carol did not take any of this quietly. She sent letters to the court questioning my mental stability and accusing Rachel of helping me hide. None of it went anywhere. The judge eventually warned her that further interference could result in a permanent no-contact order. She has been silent since then. Last month, we had the final hearing. The judge ruled that Madison's primary residence would remain with me in Oregon. Eric was granted school break visitation, and summers once Madison is a bit older if she wants that. The judge specifically cited emotional harm caused by extended family involvement and praised both parents for supporting Madison's therapy. When the ruling came down, I cried in the hallway. Not because I won, but because someone finally listened. Madison is thriving. She joined a soccer team. She made friends. She sleeps through the night again. Her therapist says her anxiety has decreased significantly. She still misses her dad, but she no longer feels responsible for adult emotions. As for me, I am still unpacking the emotional aftermath. Some family members have cut me off completely. Others have quietly reached out to say they understand, but cannot say so publicly. I lost an entire support system, but I gained peace. I still question myself sometimes. I still replay that night when I packed the car. But every time I doubt myself, I look at the girl my daughter is becoming, and I know I chose the harder right over the easier wrong. If protecting your child makes you the villain in someone else's story, then maybe being the villain is not the worst thing you can be. Final update. My decision to take my daughter and leave our entire family behind. It has been just over a year now, and I wanted to come back. Because when I was in the middle of everything, I clung to posts from people who returned long after the dust settled. I needed to know what life looked like on the other side of a decision that felt impossible at the time. Madison is 10 now, and in a way she feels older than that, but in a healthy way, not the anxious premature adulthood she was slipping into before. She laughs loudly again. She forgets to charge her tablet. She argues with me about bedtime instead of asking questions about court and custody. Those small, ordinary things feel like victories. Eric and I have reached something close to real co-parenting. It is not perfect, but it is honest. He comes out during school breaks and stays nearby. I no longer feel like I have to brace myself when they spend time together. He respects boundaries now in a way he never did before. He does not bring his parents into conversations about Madison, and when his mother tried to send Madison a letter through him, he shut it down himself. That was the moment I finally believed change was real. Carol attempted one last push about 6 months ago. She showed up unannounced at Eric's apartment during a scheduled visit and demanded to see Madison. Eric called me instead of caving. He told her to leave and threatened to involve the police if she did not. She left screaming, but she left. Since then, there has been no contact at all. I do not know if she finally accepted reality or if she is just waiting, but either way, the distance has been healing. I no longer feel like I am constantly defending my sanity. The fear that once sat in my chest all the time is gone. I did not realize how heavy it was until it lifted. I have a steady job now, and Rachel and I are still living together, though we are talking about me getting my own place nearby. She has become more than family. She has become proof that chosen family can be just as real and just as protective. Madison still asks questions sometimes about why things happened the way they did. I answer honestly, but gently. I tell her that adults make mistakes and that protecting yourself is not the same as hurting others. I tell her that love does not require you to tolerate disrespect even from people who share your blood. Looking back, I see how close I was to staying out of fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being labeled unstable. Fear of courtrooms and lawyers and whispers. I almost taught my daughter that keeping the peace matters more than keeping yourself safe. If I had stayed, I think the damage would have been quieter, but deeper. It would have shown up later in her relationships and her sense of self. Leaving was loud and messy, but it was also clear. I do not regret it anymore. I regret that it had to happen at all, but I do not regret choosing my child even when it meant losing people who claimed to love us. If anyone reading this is standing where I once stood, feeling like the bad guy for drawing a line, know this. Your child will not remember how many people were angry with you. They will remember who made them feel safe. Stories number 10. My sister found out I went through her luggage before she went back home. I'm writing this because my head is spinning, and I honestly don't know if what I did makes me a terrible person or if I reacted like any normal human would in the same situation. I never thought I would be questioning my own morals this hard over something involving my sister, but here we are. I'm 29 and I live alone in a small apartment in Ohio. My older sister, Rachel, is 36 and lives in another state. We were close growing up, but as adults, our relationship has been complicated. She's always been very confident, outspoken, and dominant in family dynamics. I've always been the quieter one who keeps the peace. That difference has caused tension over the years, especially since she tends to assume she knows best in every situation. Rachel came to stay with me for a little over 2 weeks because she said she needed a break from her routine and some time to clear her head. She works a stressful job, recently ended a long-term relationship, and said she just wanted to relax. I agreed because she's my sister, and I genuinely wanted to help. I rearranged my schedule, cleaned out my guest space, and made sure she'd be comfortable. The visit started out fine, but little things quickly started to feel off. Rachel has a habit of pushing boundaries, but this time it felt more intense. She went through my kitchen cabinets and reorganized them without asking. She commented on my lifestyle, my dating life, my finances, and even how I dressed when I left the apartment. None of it was outright cruel, but it was constant, and it wore me down. About a week into her stay, I noticed small things going missing. At first, I thought I was just misplacing stuff. A necklace I wear often wasn't where I usually leave it. A pair of earrings disappeared. Then I realized some cash I kept in a drawer was short. Not a huge amount, but enough to notice. I didn't accuse her because I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself there had to be another explanation. Still, the feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Then something bigger happened. I had a personal document in my desk that I absolutely do not share with anyone. I went to grab it one morning, and it was out of place. The drawer had clearly been opened, and the papers were shifted. That was the moment I knew someone had gone through my things. It was just the two of us in the apartment. I confronted Rachel gently. I told her I thought someone had been in my room and asked if she knew anything about it. She laughed it off and said I was being paranoid. She said she hadn't touched my stuff and suggested I was stressed or forgetful. The way she dismissed me made me feel small and stupid. After that conversation, I started paying closer attention. I noticed she spent a lot of time alone in my room when I wasn't home. She always had an excuse. She was looking for a charger. She wanted to open the window. She needed better lighting for a call. Every explanation sounded reasonable on its own, but together it felt wrong. Her trip was ending in a few days, and the anxiety was eating at me. I felt like my space wasn't mine anymore. I felt watched and unsettled in my own home. I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying everything in my head and questioning my instincts. The day before she was supposed to leave, Rachel went out to meet an old friend. She left her luggage in the guest area, already packed. I stood there staring at it for a long time. I knew going through her things was wrong. I knew it crossed a line. But I also felt like my privacy had already been violated and I needed answers. So I did it. My hands were shaking the entire time. I told myself I would just take a quick look and stop if I felt too guilty. I opened her suitcase and right away I saw items that weren't hers. My necklace was right on top, tangled in a scarf. Under that were my earrings, a makeup product that had been missing, and some of the cash I knew had disappeared. My heart dropped. I felt sick. I kept looking, partly because I was already in too deep and partly because I needed to know how far this went. I found copies of documents that looked a lot like mine. Not originals, but photos she had taken. Bank information. Personal notes. Things I never would have given her access to. I closed the suitcase and sat on the floor for a long time, trying to calm myself down. I felt betrayed, angry, embarrassed, and ashamed all at once. I hated that I'd gone through her things, but I also hated that my instincts had been right. When Rachel came back that evening, I didn't confront her right away. I needed to think. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I asked her directly why she had my belongings in her luggage. Her face changed instantly. She didn't deny it. Instead, she got defensive. She said she was just borrowing things and planned to give them back. She said I was overreacting and invading her privacy by going through her suitcase. I told her she had gone through my room and taken my things without permission. She said she was my sister and that families don't need permission. That sentence still echoes in my head. The argument escalated fast. She accused me of not trusting her. I told her trust doesn't mean blind acceptance. She said I humiliated her by snooping. I told her she humiliated me by stealing and lying to my face. At one point, she said she was just trying to help me by looking at my documents and giving advice. I told her help isn't help when it's forced and secretive. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. By the end of the conversation, she packed up and left early. No apology, no accountability, just a comment about how disappointed she was in me. Now, my phone has been blowing up with messages from our parents and one of our cousins. Rachel told them I went through her luggage and violated her privacy. She didn't mention what she had taken or why I did it. My parents told me I should have handled it differently and that I embarrassed her. They said she's older and I should have respected her. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I know going through her luggage wasn't right. I know that. But I also feel like if I hadn't, I would never have known how badly she crossed my boundaries. I'm stuck between guilt and anger. I feel like I'm being painted as the villain for reacting instead of the person who started all of this. I don't know if I should apologize for snooping, demand an apology for what she did, or just distance myself completely. I keep asking myself the same question over and over. Did I go too far by going through my sister's luggage? Or was that the only way I was ever going to find the truth? Update. My sister found out I went through her luggage before she went back home. A lot has happened since I first wrote this, and I didn't expect the fallout to be as emotionally draining as it's been. The comments really forced me to slow down and look at the situation without the fog of guilt I was drowning in. I didn't respond right away to anyone because I needed time to figure out what I actually wanted instead of reacting to everyone else's opinions. The day after Rachel left, I took photos of everything I found in her suitcase. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I realized very quickly that the narrative was being twisted. My parents kept calling, telling me I needed to apologize and make things right. They kept saying I crossed a line by going through her luggage and that no matter what, that behavior was unacceptable. So I sent them the photos. I sent pictures of my necklace, my earrings, the cash, and the copies of my documents. I didn't add commentary, I didn't argue, I just sent the proof and told them these were found in Rachel's suitcase while she was staying in my apartment. There was a long silence after that. My mom called me later that night, sounding shaken. She admitted she had no idea Rachel had taken anything. My dad was quieter, but he asked a lot of questions. They both tried to explain it away at first. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Rachel meant to give it back. Maybe she thought I wouldn't mind. That's when I finally snapped in a calm way I didn't know I had in me. I told them intent doesn't erase impact. I told them she lied to my face when I asked her directly. I told them she went into my private space and copied documents without permission. I asked them how they would feel if someone did that to them. They didn't have an answer. Rachel eventually reached out, but not in the way I hoped. Her message was long and defensive. She said she felt betrayed and violated. She said she never expected me to snoop through her belongings, and that it changed how she saw me. She accused me of trying to make her look like a criminal. I responded once, carefully. I told her I didn't go looking for drama. I told her I only checked her luggage because my privacy had already been invaded, and I felt unsafe in my own home. I told her taking my things and copying my documents was not okay under any circumstances. She replied by saying she was older, more experienced, and just trying to protect me from my own bad decisions. She said if I trusted her, none of this would have happened. That message was the final straw. I told her that trust doesn't exist without honesty and consent. I told her that being older doesn't give her authority over my life or my belongings. I told her I was taking space and that I wouldn't be engaging in conversations that dismissed my boundaries. Since then, I've gone low contact with her. I muted her messages and blocked her on social media. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The constant guilt and manipulation were affecting my sleep and mental health more than I realized. I also took steps to protect myself practically. I changed my locks. I froze my credit just in case. I reviewed my bank statements and made sure nothing else was missing. I hated that it felt necessary, but the peace of mind was worth it. My parents are in a strange place. They've stopped pushing me to apologize, but they keep asking me to be the bigger person. I told them I've been the bigger person my whole life, and all it's gotten me is ignored boundaries. I told them I'm open to a relationship with Rachel in the future, but only if there's accountability and respect. Right now, there isn't. I still feel conflicted at times. I wish I had never been put in a position where snooping felt like my only option. I wish she had just told the truth when I first asked. But I don't feel guilty the way I did before. I feel sad and disappointed, but also clearer. What I've learned is that family doesn't get a free pass to violate your privacy. Being related to someone doesn't mean you owe them access to your life, your space, or your information. I don't know what the long-term outcome will be, but I do know I'm done minimizing myself to keep the peace. Stories number 11. My coworkers say I'm lazy and entitled because I refuse to clean the coffee machine at work. I honestly never imagined a coffee machine could turn me into the office villain. But here we are. I'm 29 years old and I work in a shared office environment for a regional insurance company in the US. It's a pretty standard setup. Open floor plan, shared break room, one industrial-style coffee machine that everyone uses throughout the day. No assigned desks, no rotating cleaning schedule, just an unspoken expectation that people clean up after themselves. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to be. When I started this job about a year ago, I didn't even drink coffee. I'm more of a tea person, so the machine was background noise to me. People would gather around it in the mornings like it was some kind of ritual. I didn't touch it. I brought my own tea bags and used the electric kettle that sits on the counter next to the sink. I cleaned my mug every day and wiped the counter if I spilled water. I thought that was enough. The problem is that the coffee machine is a mess. Not sometimes. All the time. Grounds everywhere. Milk splashed on the drip tray. Sticky buttons, overflowing trash next to it. It looks like no one has ever wiped it down properly. I noticed early on that one or two people seemed to take responsibility for cleaning it. They'd grumble while doing it, sigh loudly, and make comments about how no one else helps. I sympathized, but I didn't step in because I wasn't contributing to the mess. A few months in, one of my coworkers, Brian, made a joke during a morning meeting about how the coffee fairy hadn't come by to clean the machine. Everyone laughed. Then he looked at me and said, maybe some people think it cleans itself. I remember feeling a little confused, but I brushed it off. Later that day, another coworker named Allison approached me in the break room. She said, half joking, half serious, that everyone takes turns cleaning the coffee machine and that it would be nice if I helped out. I told her I don't use it and that I clean up after myself with the kettle. She raised her eyebrows and said, well, it's a shared space. I didn't push back, but I didn't agree either. After that, the comments became more pointed. Someone would sigh dramatically when the machine was dirty and say it must be nice to never have to clean this thing. Someone else would say, some of us actually contribute around here. I started feeling like I was being watched every time I walked into the break room. Here's the part that really matters. The coffee machine isn't just messy. It's gross. Mold builds up in the water reservoir if it's not cleaned properly. Old milk sits in the crevices. I once saw a fruit fly crawl out of the drip tray. The thought of taking it apart and cleaning someone else's dried milk and old coffee makes my stomach turn. More importantly, I don't think it's safe. We don't have training, gloves, or proper cleaning supplies for a machine like that. It's an industrial model, not a simple home coffee pot. I brought this up to our office manager, a woman named Karen. I explained that I don't use the machine, that it's unsanitary, and that I don't feel comfortable being responsible for cleaning something I didn't use. I suggested maybe the company could hire a cleaning service or set a formal schedule with proper supplies. Karen nodded and said she'd look into it. She didn't. Instead, a few weeks later, a passive-aggressive sign appeared taped to the wall above the coffee machine. It said, "Please clean the coffee machine after use." It also said, "We all share this space." The word "all" was underlined. I knew exactly who that was aimed at. Things escalated last Friday. I walked into the break room to refill my kettle, and Brian was there, aggressively scrubbing the coffee machine. He looked at me and said, "Must be nice to be so entitled you don't have to help." I told him calmly that I don't use the machine and that I'd already spoken to Karen about it. He laughed and said everyone uses the break room, so everyone cleans. I said I clean up my own mess. He snapped back and said that's not how being a team player works. I walked away shaking. By the end of the day, I found out Brian had been telling people I'm lazy and think I'm above doing shared chores. Someone else added entitled to that list. Suddenly, people who used to be friendly were short with me. A few stopped inviting me to lunch. I started questioning myself. Maybe I should just suck it up and clean the machine occasionally to keep the peace. But every time I picture my hands covered in someone else's old coffee residue, I feel angry all over again. I didn't agree to be a janitor. I didn't agree to clean equipment I don't use. And it bothers me that the loudest people complaining are the same ones who leave the biggest mess. I checked my job description. Nothing about cleaning communal appliances. I checked our employee handbook. It says employees are responsible for keeping shared spaces tidy and cleaning up after themselves. It does not say anything about rotating deep cleaning duties. Now I'm stuck. The social pressure is intense. I hate feeling like the office problem. I hate that this has turned into a character judgment instead of a practical issue. I don't want to escalate things, but I also don't want to be bullied into doing something that feels unfair and unsanitary. So here I am, wondering if standing my ground makes me unreasonable or if this is just a workplace culture issue that's gone out of hand. I came here because I needed to get this off my chest and maybe figure out what the right move is before this gets even worse. Update: my coworkers say I'm lazy and entitled because I refuse to clean the coffee machine at work. I didn't think a situation this small would keep growing. But somehow, it managed to turn into a full-blown office conflict that forced management to actually pay attention. After everything that happened with Brian and the rumors, I tried to keep my head down. I did my job, avoided the break room unless absolutely necessary, and ate lunch at my desk. The tension was still there though. People whispered when I walked in. Conversations would stop mid-sentence. It felt like high school all over again, except with spreadsheets and health insurance. The following Monday, I got an email from Karen asking me to stop by her office. I assumed she was finally going to address the coffee machine issue directly. I was half right. When I sat down, she told me she'd received multiple complaints about my attitude toward shared responsibilities. That wording immediately put me on edge. I asked her to clarify what responsibilities she meant. She said the coffee machine cleaning had become a point of conflict and that some coworkers felt I wasn't being a team player. I told her again that I don't use the machine and that I clean up after myself. I reminded her that I'd already raised concerns about sanitation and safety. I also told her about Brian calling me entitled in the break room. Karen looked uncomfortable and admitted she'd heard things had gotten heated, but said she wanted to focus on solutions, not blame. I asked her directly if cleaning the coffee machine was a job requirement. She said no, not officially. I asked if there was a written schedule or policy requiring all employees to rotate cleaning duties. She said there wasn't. I asked if refusing to clean it could be considered a performance issue. She hesitated, then said no. That was the moment I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. I told her I was willing to compromise, but not by taking on responsibility for a machine I don't use. I suggested 3 options. 1. The company hires a cleaning service to deep clean it regularly. 2. A formal schedule is created for people who actually use the machine. 3. The machine is removed entirely and people bring their own coffee setups. Karen blinked at me like she hadn't expected me to be that direct. She said she'd need to think about it. 2 days later, an email went out to the entire office. Karen announced that effective immediately, the company would be contracting the cleaning staff to handle the coffee machine twice a week. Employees were still expected to clean up after themselves for minor spills, but no one would be responsible for deep cleaning the machine. There was no mention of me or the conflict. The reaction was immediate and mixed. A few people visibly relaxed. Others looked annoyed. Brian didn't look at me all day. Later, Allison stopped by my desk and said, kind of awkwardly, that she didn't realize how gross the machine actually was until she saw the cleaning staff take it apart. She said it was worse than she expected. That felt like a small victory. The biggest surprise came the following week. HR asked me to come in for a brief check-in. I panicked at first, but it turned out they just wanted my side of the story documented since the situation had escalated to name-calling. I explained everything again, including Brian's comment and how isolated I'd felt. The HR rep, a guy named Steven, told me that while shared spaces can be tricky, no employee should be singled out or labeled over an unwritten expectation. He said the gossip and name-calling weren't appropriate and would be addressed. I don't know exactly what was said to Brian or anyone else, but the atmosphere shifted again after that. The whispers stopped. People started making eye contact again. Brian is still cold, but he no longer makes comments in the break room. A couple coworkers have even joked that the coffee tastes better now that it's actually clean. I'm still processing how draining this whole thing was. I spent weeks doubting myself over something that, when written down plainly, makes no sense. I learned how quickly a workplace can turn on someone over an assumption and how hard it is to push back when the issue is framed as personality instead of policy. I don't feel triumphant. I feel tired. But I also feel validated. Standing my ground didn't make me lazy or entitled. It forced a problem into the open that management had been avoiding. I still bring my tea every morning. I still wipe down the counter after I use the kettle. The difference now is that I no longer feel like I have to apologize for not cleaning a mess I didn't make. The office isn't perfect, and I know some people still think I was difficult. I can live with that. What matters more is that I learned something about boundaries and about how important it is to ask for clarity instead of accepting guilt that doesn't belong to you. Final update, my coworkers say I'm lazy and entitled because I refuse to clean the coffee machine at work. I didn't think there would be anything left to say after the cleaning service was brought in, but the last few weeks have given me a lot of perspective on how this whole thing really played out and how it's going to affect me going forward. The immediate tension faded, but the emotional aftermath lingered longer than I expected. For a while, things felt awkward but functional. People were polite again. Meetings were normal. The break room stopped feeling like a battleground. The coffee machine stayed clean, which alone proved my point more than any argument ever could. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been quietly labeled as difficult by a few people, especially Brian. About 2 weeks after HR got involved, Brian asked to talk to me. I was caught off guard and honestly debated saying no, but I didn't want to keep carrying the resentment around. We went into a small conference room. He didn't apologize outright, which didn't surprise me. Instead, He said he felt embarrassed by how the situation turned out and annoyed that management stepped in. He admitted he'd been frustrated for a long time about always being the one cleaning the machine and said he took it out on me because I was the easiest target since I didn't use it. Hearing that didn't make me feel better, but it did make things clearer. I told him that being frustrated didn't give him the right to call me entitled or turn coworkers against me. I told him how isolating that was and how close I came to just giving in to make it stop. He went quiet for a moment and then said he hadn't realized it got that bad. That was the closest thing to accountability I was going to get, and I decided to accept it for my own peace. Something unexpected came out of all of this. Management sent out a revised office guidelines email a few days later. It covered shared spaces, cleanliness expectations, and conflict resolution. For the first time since I started, there were actual written standards instead of vague social pressure. Reading that email felt surreal, like all of this chaos had finally turned into something concrete. I've also noticed a change in myself. I'm more aware of how quickly workplaces can slip into unwritten rules that punish the wrong people. I'm less willing to assume I'm in the wrong just because I'm outnumbered. That's been uncomfortable but empowering at the same time. A few coworkers have quietly told me they were glad I didn't back down. One admitted she'd been cleaning the microwave messes for years even though she never used it, just because she didn't want to be judged. Hearing that made me realize this was never really about coffee. It was about how silence becomes expectation, and how people who speak up get labeled instead of listened to. I'm not pretending this ended perfectly. Some relationships at work are still strained. Brian and I are civil, not friendly. That's fine. What matters is that I no longer feel anxious walking into the break room or questioning my worth over something so small and ridiculous. If there's one thing I'm taking away from this, it's that boundaries at work matter just as much as productivity. Doing your job well doesn't mean absorbing everyone else's frustrations. Sometimes standing your ground feels lonely at first, but in the long run, it creates clarity, not conflict. The coffee machine still hums every morning. People still gather around it like it's sacred. I still make my tea and mind my business. The difference now is that the problem that never should have been mine is finally being handled by the people responsible for it. And for the first time since this started, stories number 12. My deadbeat sister ruined Halloween for my nephew, and I cannot look at her the same way anymore. I have been going back and forth on whether to write this because part of me feels like I'm airing family business, and part of me feels like if I don't say it out loud, I'm going to explode. I keep seeing my nephew's face over and over again, and every time I think about it, I get this tight, angry feeling in my chest that won't go away. My sister has always been unreliable. That's the nicest word I can use. She is the kind of person who talks a lot about plans and intentions and then disappears when it's time to actually show up. Growing up, that was just how she was. She was always late, always forgetting things, always needing someone else to clean up the mess. When it was just adults involved, it was annoying but manageable. Once she had a kid, it stopped being something I could ignore. My nephew is 7. He is one of those kids who feels everything deeply. He remembers promises. He talks about things weeks in advance. When he gets excited, his whole body lights up. Halloween is his favorite thing in the world. Not just the candy, but the costumes, the decorations, the idea of going door to door and being seen. He has been talking about this Halloween since the end of summer. My sister promised him she would take him trick-or-treating this year. Not just promised casually, but hyped it up. She talked about it constantly. She asked him what costume he wanted. She showed him pictures online. She told him they would go to the big neighborhood across town where people really decorate. Every time I saw him, he talked about it. He trusted her completely. I should have known better. Deep down, I think I did. I offered more than once to help. I said I could drive them. I said we could all go together. She brushed me off and said she had it handled. She said this was her thing with her son. I didn't want to step on her toes, so I backed off. Halloween day came, and I had a bad feeling from the start. By mid-afternoon, she still hadn't picked up the costume she said she ordered. She texted me asking if I could grab it for her because she was tired. I did it, because of course I did. I dropped it off at her place, and my nephew was already in full costume mode, running around, asking what time they were leaving, asking how many houses they would go to. She said they would leave soon. Then it was after dinner. Then it was when she finished getting ready. Then she said she wasn't feeling well, and maybe they would just go for a little bit. I watched the excitement drain out of my nephew's face inch by inch as the sky got darker. Eventually she sat down and told him they weren't going. She said it was too cold and she was too tired. She said, maybe next year. She said he had candy at home anyway. She said it like it was no big deal, like she wasn't crushing something important. He didn't scream or cry the way people expect kids to. He just went quiet. He asked one question, which was, why did you say we were going then? She snapped at him and told him not to be dramatic. That was the moment I felt something in me break. I offered to take him myself right then. I said we still had time. I said we could at least do a few houses. She said no. She said it was too late and he would get overstimulated. She said I was undermining her. She told him to go change out of his costume. I will never forget the way he stood there, holding his candy bucket, still in costume, not moving. He looked embarrassed and confused and small. When he finally went to his room, I heard the door close very softly. That sound has been stuck in my head ever since. Later that night, I went home and cried. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet, angry tears. I kept thinking about how excited he had been, how much trust he had put in her, how easily she dismissed it. This wasn't about Halloween. This was about a pattern. The next day, she acted like nothing happened. She posted pictures of him in his costume from earlier that day with captions about how cute he was. People commented about how fun Halloween must have been. She liked the comments. I felt sick. I finally confronted her. I told her what she did was cruel. I told her that he trusted her and she broke that trust. She immediately went on the defensive. She said I was judging her. She said parenting is hard. She said kids need to learn that plans change. She said I was overreacting. I asked her if she had even apologized to him. She said she didn't need to because he would forget about it. That sentence changed how I see her permanently. He won't forget. I remember the things adults promised me and didn't follow through on. Those moments stick. They teach you what you can expect from people. Since then, I've been distant. I can't pretend anymore. Every time she talks about being a good mom or how much she loves her son, I feel this flash of anger. Love isn't just words. It's showing up. It's following through. It's not making promises you don't intend to keep. I've been spending more time with my nephew. I don't badmouth his mom. I don't contradict her in front of him. But I make sure that when I say something, I mean it. If I promise to pick him up, I show up early. If I say we're going somewhere, we go. I can tell he's starting to notice the difference, and that both breaks my heart and makes me angry all over again. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if my sister will ever change. What I do know is that I can't look at her the same way anymore. Watching her casually crush her kid's excitement over something that mattered so much to him flipped a switch in me that I don't think can be flipped back. This wasn't about candy or costumes. It was about trust. And once you see someone break a child's trust that easily, it's impossible to unsee it. Update: my deadbeat sister ruined Halloween for my nephew, and I cannot look at her the same way anymore. I honestly thought things would cool down after Halloween and that I would just quietly carry this resentment and move on, but that's not what happened. If anything, everything since then has made it worse because it showed me that Halloween wasn't a one-off bad night. It was just the most visible example of a much bigger problem. A few days after Halloween, my nephew started acting different when I saw him. He was quieter around his mom and clingier with me. If I said something like, "We'll do that next time," he would immediately ask, "Are you sure?" That question hit me like a punch to the chest. A 7-year-old should not sound like that. It told me everything I needed to know about how often he's been disappointed. I tried to gently bring it up with my sister again, framing it as concern for him instead of criticism of her. I said I noticed he seemed anxious about plans, and that maybe it would help to either follow through more consistently or stop hyping things up so much. She blew up. She accused me of trying to turn her kid against her. She said I was acting like I was his parent. She said, I don't know what it's like to be exhausted all the time. I do know what it's like to be exhausted. What I don't know is what it's like to promise a child something repeatedly and then act shocked when they're hurt. The conversation ended with her telling me to stay in my lane. I left her place shaking, not because she yelled, but because I realized she truly does not see a problem with her behavior. Things escalated when his school called her about him being withdrawn in class. She complained to me about it like it was an inconvenience. She said teachers overreact and kids are sensitive these days. She laughed it off. I asked if she'd talked to him about how he was feeling. She said there was nothing to talk about. That was the moment I stopped trusting her judgment entirely. I started paying closer attention, and once I did, I couldn't stop seeing it. Missed school events, forgotten permission slips, canceled weekends at the last minute, promises replaced with excuses, each one small enough on its own to dismiss, but together forming a pattern that feels deeply unfair to a kid who didn't ask for any of this. I started quietly stepping in more, picking him up when she forgot, showing up to his school events when she didn't, making plans with him that were small and realistic so I knew I could keep them. I never told him why I was there instead of his mom. I just showed up. The look on his face every time told me how much it mattered. My sister noticed, of course. She accused me of making her look bad. She said people were starting to ask questions. She told me I was crossing a line and that if I didn't back off, she would limit my access to him. That threat terrified me more than anything she's ever said. I realized how little power I actually have here, no matter how wrong things feel. I talked to another family member about it, hoping for some support or at least perspective. What I got instead was a familiar response. She's doing her best. Don't rock the boat. At least he has a roof over his head. That's when it really sank in how normalized this kind of neglect can be when it doesn't leave visible bruises. I'm stuck in this horrible place where I want to protect my nephew, but I also know I can't save him from his own parent. I don't want to become the bad guy in his mom's story. I don't want to lose him. I also don't want to sit quietly and watch him learn that people who love you don't show up. Halloween was the first time I saw the damage clearly because it was so public and so avoidable. Since then, I've realized that for him, disappointment is routine. And that realization has changed something in me permanently. I'm still trying to figure out what the right balance is. How to be present without provoking retaliation. How to support him without making promises I can't legally guarantee. How to live with the anger I feel toward my sister without letting it poison everything. All I know is that I don't regret being there for him. And I don't regret seeing the truth, even though it hurts. I just wish the truth didn't involve a kid learning so early that the person he should be able to rely on most is the least reliable one in his life. Final update. My deadbeat sister ruined Halloween for my nephew, and I cannot look at her the same way anymore. It took me a long time to write this because I needed to know where things actually landed instead of reacting while everything was still raw. I kept thinking there would be one big moment where everything either blew up or magically improved, but that isn't how it happened. It was quieter and heavier and in some ways more permanent. After my last update, my sister followed through on her threat in small ways. Not outright banning me, but limiting access just enough to remind me who has control. Canceled visits. Short answers. Suddenly busy weekends. Every time it happened, my stomach dropped because I knew exactly why she was doing it. Not because I did something wrong with my nephew, but because I made her feel exposed. What hurt the most is that my nephew noticed. He would ask why I wasn't coming over. He would ask when we could hang out again. Once he asked if I was mad at him. That question almost broke me. I reassured him, carefully, honestly, without blaming his mom. I told him adults have complicated schedules sometimes, and that I loved him. I told him that when I say I'll be there, I mean it, even if it takes a while. I stopped trying to reason with my sister. Every conversation turned into a fight where she framed herself as the victim and me as the villain. I realized that nothing I said was going to make her reflect. The more I pushed, the more she dug in. So I changed strategies. I got quieter. I stayed calm. I documented everything privately. Missed pickups. Canceled plans. Messages that contradicted themselves. Not because I want to take her child away, but because I finally accepted that pretending this isn't happening helps no one. There was one moment that sealed everything for me. My nephew had a school event he was excited about. Another one of those things he talked about for weeks. I asked my sister if she was going. She said probably. I asked if I could go too. She shrugged and said sure. The day of the event, she didn't show up. No text. No explanation. I was there. I watched him scan the room. I watched his shoulders drop when he realized it was just me. Afterward, he didn't cry. He just said thanks for coming and held my hand a little tighter than usual. That was it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about one holiday or one bad decision. This was about a kid slowly learning to lower his expectations in order to protect himself. I went home that night and accepted a truth I had been avoiding. I cannot fix this. I cannot make my sister be the parent he deserves. I cannot shield him from every disappointment. What I can do is be consistent. Be safe. Be honest in age-appropriate ways. Be someone he doesn't have to doubt. I also had to grieve the sister I thought I had. The one I kept hoping would step up if I just said the right thing. That hope was keeping me stuck. Letting go of it hurt, but it also clarified everything. I stopped feeling guilty for seeing reality as it is instead of how it should be. Right now, things are tense but stable. I see my nephew less than I want to, but when I do, I show up fully. I never promise things I'm not 100% sure I can deliver. I follow through every time. I let him be disappointed when he needs to be instead of rushing to fix it. I listen when he talks. I don't minimize his feelings the way his mom does. As for my sister, I've accepted that our relationship will never be what it was. I am polite. I am distant. I do not trust her. That line has been crossed, and it can't be uncrossed. Watching her repeatedly choose convenience over her child's emotional well-being changed how I see her at a fundamental level. This still hurts. It probably always will. But the anger has settled into something steadier. Determination. Awareness. Boundaries. I'm no longer asking myself if I'm overreacting. I'm asking myself how to be a stable presence in a situation that may never be stable. Halloween was the moment my illusions shattered. Everything after confirmed that they needed to. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. My nephew will grow up knowing that at least one adult in his life meant what they said. And if that's all I can give him, then it will have to be enough. Stories number 13. My daughter spent $90 on shoes for her friend, and I do not know how to feel about it. I am still trying to process this, and I keep going back and forth between being proud, confused, worried, and a little upset all at the same time. I figured writing it out might help me understand my own feelings, because right now, they are all tangled together. I am a 42-year-old single mom living in Pennsylvania. I have one child, my daughter Haley, who is 15. Her dad, Mark, and I divorced when she was 8. He is around, pays child support, and sees her every other weekend, but the day-to-day parenting is on me. Money is not terrible, but it is not easy either. I budget carefully, and I try to teach Haley the value of money because I did not grow up with much. Haley is a good kid. She does well in school, stays out of trouble, and is generally kind. She has a part-time job at a local coffee shop where she works weekends. I was proud when she got it. We agreed that part of her paycheck would be for saving, part for spending, and part for bigger things she wants. I do not control every dollar she earns, but I do guide her. Last week, I noticed a shoebox on the kitchen counter. It was a nice brand, the kind I would never buy for myself at full price. I asked Haley if she got new shoes. She hesitated for just a second and said they were not for her. That immediately caught my attention. I asked what she meant, and she told me she bought them for her friend Lily. I assumed she meant she found something cheap or secondhand. I asked how much they cost. She said $90. I thought I misheard her. I actually said, 90? Out loud. She nodded and said yes like it was no big deal. I felt my stomach drop. $90 is a lot of money in our house. I asked why she would spend that much on shoes for a friend. She told me Lily's shoes were falling apart and kids at school were making fun of her. She said Lily's mom is struggling and could not afford new ones right now. I did not yell. I did not ground her. I just sat down because I suddenly felt overwhelmed. Part of me was shocked that my 15-year-old spent that much without talking to me. Another part of me was touched by how thoughtful and generous it was. Those two feelings collided hard. I asked Haley where the money came from. She said it was from her job, not from savings, and she still put money aside like we agreed. She showed me her banking app to prove it. She had thought this through more than I expected. I asked if Lily knew how much the shoes cost. Haley said no. She planned to give them to her and say they were on sale. She did not want Lily to feel bad or embarrassed. That made my throat tighten. Still, I could not ignore the practical side. I asked if she realized that $90 could go toward things she needs, like school supplies, clothes, or savings for a car someday. She said she knew, but she could not stop thinking about how bad Lily felt every day at school. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about boundaries, money habits, and whether I was failing to teach her something important. I also kept thinking about how rare it is to see genuine kindness like that, especially at her age. The next day, I called her dad Mark to get his perspective. That might have been a mistake. He immediately said it was irresponsible and that I should make Haley return the shoes. He said I was raising her to be taken advantage of. Hearing that made me defensive. He tends to see things in black and white. Later that evening, I talked to Haley again. I asked if Lily or anyone else pressured her into this. She said no. She said it was her idea and that she felt good about it. She also said something that stuck with me. She said, "Mom, I have enough. She doesn't right now. I am proud of her empathy, but I am also scared. The world is not always kind to generous people. I do not want her to think it is her responsibility to fix everyone's problems with her own money. I also do not want to crush that instinct by reacting the wrong way." I asked her if she would be okay if we set some guidelines moving forward, like talking to me before spending large amounts, even if it is her own money. She agreed without arguing. That helped. The shoes are still in the box. She plans to give them to Lily this weekend. I have not stopped her. I keep replaying it in my head, wondering if I should. I keep asking myself if this is a parenting moment where I teach restraint, or one where I quietly let her kindness exist without interference. I do not know how to feel about it, and maybe that is okay. Maybe being a parent means sitting with discomfort sometimes, instead of rushing to control the outcome. All I know is that my daughter showed me a side of her that I did not expect, and whether this was the right decision or not, it made me realize she is growing into her own person faster than I am ready for. Update: my daughter spent $90 on shoes for her friend, and I do not know how to feel about it. I waited a bit before coming back, because I wanted to see how things actually played out instead of reacting emotionally. I am glad I did, because the situation unfolded in a way I did not fully expect. Haley gave Lily the shoes last Saturday. She asked me if I wanted to come with her, but I said no. That was her moment, not mine, and I did not want my presence to make it awkward or feel like charity from an adult. She left the house nervous, holding the box like it was fragile. When she came back, she was quiet for a while. I asked her how it went. She sat down at the kitchen table and told me everything. Lily cried when she opened the box. Not dramatic sobbing, but that quiet kind of crying where someone is trying not to fall apart. Haley said Lily kept asking if she was sure and kept saying she could not accept them. Haley told her they were a gift and that she deserved nice things too. That part alone made me tear up, but it did not end there. Later that evening, I got a message on Facebook from Lily's mom, Jessica. I had met her a couple of times at school events, but we are not close. Her message was long and very emotional. She thanked me over and over, said she had been having a rough year after medical bills and a job change, and that she felt embarrassed her daughter was struggling at school because of something as basic as shoes. She also said something important. She said she planned to pay us back once she was back on her feet. I told her that was not necessary and that Haley made the choice herself. She insisted at first, but I stood firm. That conversation made me realize this was not about being taken advantage of. This was about one family helping another during a rough patch. After that, I sat Haley down again. This time the conversation felt different. I told her I was proud of her kindness, and I meant it. I also told her that generosity is a good thing, but it needs boundaries. I explained that adults struggle with this too, not just kids. We talked about how helping does not mean sacrificing your own stability or future. She listened, really listened. She told me she did not regret buying the shoes, but she understood why it worried me. She said she did not want me to think she was careless with money. That reassured me more than anything. I also had another conversation with Mark, her dad. I told him how it actually went and about Lily's mom reaching out. He softened a bit. He still thinks $90 was too much, but he admitted that Haley's heart was in the right place. For us, that is about as close to agreement as it gets. Something unexpected happened a few days later. Haley told me kids at school noticed Lily's new shoes. Instead of teasing her, a couple of them complimented her. One girl even apologized for past comments. I know kids can be cruel, but they can also surprise you. This whole situation forced me to look at my own upbringing. I grew up being told to hold on tight to everything, because no one would help you if you fell. Watching my daughter choose generosity made me realize I may have leaned too hard into survival mode without balancing it with compassion. I am still setting rules. We agreed that any purchase over $50 needs a conversation first, even if it is her own money. She agreed without pushing back. I also helped her set up a separate savings account labeled long term, so she can see her future goals clearly while still having freedom with the rest. Do I still feel a little uneasy about the amount she spent? Yes, but that uneasiness is quieter now. It has been replaced by respect for the kind of person she is becoming. Update. My daughter spent $90 on shoes for her friend, and I do not know how to feel about it. I think this will be my last update because things have finally settled, and I feel like I understand the situation and myself a lot better now. Reading back on my original post, I can hear how conflicted I was, and while those feelings were valid, they have shifted into something calmer and more grounded. A few weeks have passed since Haley gave Lily the shoes, and the ripple effects have been unexpected in the best way. Lily has been over to our house a few times since then. I had only seen her briefly before, but getting to know her more changed my perspective even further. She is quiet, polite, and clearly very aware of not wanting to be a burden. Watching the two of them together made it obvious that this was not some shallow gesture or social move. They genuinely care about each other. At one point, Lily thanked me directly. She looked so nervous doing it that my heart broke a little. She said the shoes made her feel normal again, like she could just walk into school without thinking about her feet or what people were whispering. That sentence alone made the $90 feel small in comparison. Jessica and I have talked a few times since then. She is slowly getting back on her feet, and she updates me even though I never asked her to. I think she just needed someone to know she was trying. There is no sense of entitlement there, no expectation of more help. If anything, she seems determined to regain her independence. That eased one of my biggest fears, which was that Haley's kindness would open the door to being taken advantage of. Haley and I also kept talking, not just about money, but about values. I told her that kindness is powerful, but so is discernment. I explained that there will be times in her life when she wants to help but cannot, and that saying no does not make her a bad person. She told me she understood, and that she does not want to give until it hurts herself. Hearing that in her own words made me realize she is thinking more maturely than I gave her credit for. Something else changed too. I noticed Haley becoming more thoughtful with her spending overall. Not because I forced rules on her, but because she seemed more aware of what money represents. She skipped buying something for herself one weekend and said she was saving because she liked knowing she had a cushion. That told me this experience did not make her reckless. If anything, it made her more intentional. Mark has backed off as well. He still would not have handled it the same way, but he stopped criticizing and even admitted he was proud of her, though he said it in that awkward way he has when emotions are involved. I think seeing the positive outcome helped him let go of the fear that she would be naive or easily used. As for me, I learned something uncomfortable but important. My first instinct was control, even though I masked it as concern. That instinct comes from my own past and my own fear of scarcity. This situation forced me to confront that and realize that teaching my child does not always mean preventing every possible mistake. Sometimes it means letting them act on their values and then walking alongside them as they learn. The shoes are just shoes, but what they represented was much bigger. They showed me my daughter's heart, her empathy, and her sense of responsibility. They also showed me areas where I still need to grow as a parent. I still believe in boundaries. I still believe in teaching financial responsibility. But I also believe now that kindness does not have to be the enemy of stability. They can exist together if guided properly. I no longer feel torn about this. I feel proud, a little humbled, and grateful that this lesson came in a way that strengthened our relationship instead of damaging it. Parenting does not come with a manual, but moments like this remind me that sometimes the right choice is not the one that feels safest, but the one that aligns with the person you hope your child becomes. Stories number 14. My coworkers and boss planned the company Christmas dinner without me. I am 21 and this is my first full-time job out of college. I started working at a small tech repair company in Texas about 8 months ago. There are only 7 of us total, including the owner. I was excited when I got hired because the job pays better than anything I expected at my age, and I thought it would be a good place to learn and grow. The problem is that I am the only woman and the youngest person there. My boss Mark is 40, and the rest of my coworkers are men ranging from their early 20s to mid-30s. On my first day, everyone was polite and welcoming, but I could tell quickly that I did not quite fit in. They all bonded over things I was not really part of, like high school football stories, old video games, and long conversations about cars. I did my best to be friendly. I asked questions. I laughed at jokes even when I did not fully get them. I brought donuts once a week for the office. No one was outright mean to me, but there was always this subtle sense that I was on the outside looking in. At first I told myself it was normal. I was new. I was young. I was the only woman. Of course it would take time. As December got closer, people started casually mentioning the company Christmas dinner. It was not discussed in meetings or emails. It was talked about in the shop while working or during lunch. I would hear things like, "We should go to that steakhouse," or "Last year, the portions were huge." Sometimes they would stop talking when I walked into the room. Other times they would keep going like I was not there. I assumed it was a company thing that I would be included in officially later. Last Friday, one of my coworkers named Tyler mentioned he needed to leave early because of the Christmas dinner reservation. I laughed and said, "Oh yeah, what time are we going?" He looked confused and said, "Oh, I thought Mark told you." I said, "Told me what?" He got quiet and said, "Never mind, maybe he just assumed." I felt my face get hot, but I tried to play it off. After work, I checked my email. Nothing. I checked our work group chat. Nothing. I even checked the bulletin board in the break room. Nothing. The dinner was that night. I went home and cried in my car before driving away. I felt stupid for being that upset over a dinner, but it hit something deeper. It made me feel invisible. Later that evening, I saw photos on social media. All of them were there, including Mark. They were dressed nice. They were smiling. They were tagged at the steakhouse. No one mentioned me. On Monday, I went into work like normal. No one said anything. They talked about how good the food was and how Mark paid for everything. I sat there, pretending to focus on my computer, while my chest felt tight. At lunch, I finally asked Mark if I could talk to him privately. I asked if there was a reason I was not included in the Christmas dinner. He looked genuinely surprised. He said he assumed I would not want to go because I never talk much and because it was mostly guys. I told him that assumption hurt. I told him I felt excluded. He apologized and said it was not intentional. He said next time he would make sure to include me. I nodded, but I left his office feeling worse, not better. Since then, I have been replaying everything in my head. Part of me wonders if I am overreacting. Another part of me feels like this crosses into something more serious because it was a company event and I was the only one left out. I worry about retaliation if I push this further. I worry about being labeled sensitive or dramatic. I also worry that if I stay quiet, this will just keep happening. I do my job well. I get good feedback. But I feel like I do not belong, and that hurts more than I expected it to. I do not know if this is something I should bring to HR, even though we technically do not have an HR department. I do not know if I should just accept that this workplace culture is not for me and start looking elsewhere. I do not know if I should confront my coworkers directly or let it go. I just know that being left out like that made me feel small in a way I have not felt since high school, and I hate that my workplace is making me feel that way. Update: my coworkers and boss planned the company Christmas dinner without me. It has been about 3 months since the Christmas dinner, and a lot has happened in ways I did not expect. I took some time before saying anything because I wanted to be sure I was reacting thoughtfully and not emotionally. I also wanted to see if Mark's apology would turn into actual change. For the first few weeks, nothing really shifted. People were polite but distant. There was an unspoken awkwardness, like everyone knew something uncomfortable had happened, but no one wanted to address it. I stopped bringing donuts because I realized I was trying too hard to earn space in a room that should have already made room for me. Eventually, I decided to document things for my own clarity. Not because I was planning to file a complaint, but because writing things down helped me see patterns. I noticed I was often left out of informal conversations about projects until the last minute. I noticed that decisions were sometimes made in the shop instead of during meetings where I was present. None of it was blatant, but taken together, it painted a picture of being an afterthought. About a month after the dinner, Mark called me into his office. He said he had been thinking about our conversation and realized the company culture had developed in a way that was not very welcoming to new or different voices. He admitted that most social plans were made impulsively by the guys, and he often just went along with it. He said he did not want me to feel like I did not belong. He asked me what I needed from him to feel more included. That question alone surprised me. I told him I did not need special treatment. I just wanted transparency and equal consideration. If there was a work event, I wanted to be invited and allowed to decide for myself whether I wanted to attend. I told him I wanted important work discussions to happen in meetings, not side conversations. I also told him I wanted to feel safe speaking up without worrying about being dismissed. He listened. He took notes. He did not interrupt. After that, things slowly started to change. Mark started sending calendar invites for lunches and team events instead of relying on word of mouth. Meetings became more structured. When side conversations started, he redirected them back to the group. The biggest shift came when one of my coworkers, Ryan, casually suggested a happy hour after work, and Mark immediately said, "Let's put it in the group chat so everyone can decide." That small moment meant more to me than I expected. I also started speaking up more. I realized I had been shrinking myself to avoid being a problem. I stopped doing that. I shared ideas. I asked questions. I set boundaries when jokes veered into uncomfortable territory. It was scary at first, but it felt empowering. Not everyone adjusted easily. One coworker named Blake became noticeably colder toward me. He stopped joking around me and would sometimes sigh when I spoke in meetings. Instead of internalizing it, I documented it and addressed it calmly with Mark. Mark spoke to him privately, and whatever was said seemed to help because the behavior improved. Last week, we had a company lunch to celebrate landing a new contract. Mark made a point of announcing it in advance and asking for everyone's availability. We all went. No one was left out. I still do not know if this will be my forever job, but I do know that I learned something important. Feeling excluded is not something you just have to accept, especially in a professional setting. Speaking up is uncomfortable, but staying silent costs more in the long run. I am glad I did not quit immediately. I am also glad I did not convince myself that my feelings were invalid. If nothing else, this experience taught me that inclusion does not happen by accident, and sometimes change starts with one very uncomfortable conversation. Final update. My coworkers and boss planned the company Christmas dinner without me. It has been almost a year since the Christmas dinner, and I wanted to come back one last time because my situation has changed in a way I never expected when I first wrote this. I am 22 now, and I can finally say I feel like an actual adult at work instead of a kid trying to earn a seat at the table. The biggest change is that I am no longer in the same role. About 5 months ago, Mark approached me about taking on more responsibility. He said he had noticed how much more confident I had become and how my communication had improved. He also admitted that losing me would be a big hit to the team. Hearing that after feeling invisible for so long was surreal. I accepted a promotion with a raise and more autonomy over my projects. That alone changed how some of my coworkers interacted with me. I hate that it took a title for certain people to show respect, but I would be lying if I said it did not make things easier. The team dynamic is not perfect, but it is healthier. Social plans are now always shared openly. Sometimes I go, sometimes I do not. The important part is that I get to choose. No one assumes anymore. Blake eventually transferred to another location. There was no dramatic fallout. He just never really adapted to the shift in culture. Once he left, the office felt noticeably lighter. One thing I did not expect was how much this experience would change how I see myself. I used to think being easygoing meant staying quiet. Now I know it means knowing when to speak and trusting that my presence has value. A few months ago, a new hire started. She is 19 and just as nervous as I was. Watching how Mark and the rest of the team welcomed her made me realize that things truly did change. She was invited to everything from day one. No assumptions, no awkward gaps. That mattered more to me than any apology ever could. I still think about that night I cried in my car. It feels distant now, but it also reminds me how easily exclusion can happen when no one is paying attention. I do not feel bitterness anymore. I feel clarity. This will not be my last job, and I know I will face uncomfortable situations again. But I also know now that my discomfort is often a signal, not a weakness.